What is going on, everybody? James Hancock here, and back to celebrate the 50th anniversary of the Omen, a genuine horror classic, which in the weeks ahead of its release managed to get the audience worked up into a state of feverish anticipation with ominous messages like, "You've been warned," and "You are one day closer to the end of the world." And when the movie finally unleashed the Antichrist upon the public in the form of a little boy, the number 666 would be burned into the public's mind for all time, leading to an entire generation of kids calling each other Damien anytime somebody said or did anything remotely weird or alarming.
If this is the truth, where does it end?
But the movie was that rare phenomenon where a big studio like Fox put the full weight of their resources behind an unapologetic horror movie, and the movie was so successful, many have claimed that it opened the door to 20th Century Fox having the freedom to roll the dice the following year on an unusual project that came to be known as Star Wars. And as far as the official story to The Omen goes, the synopsis they have over on IMDb, it's laughably simple. It just says, an American ambassador to Britain and his wife may be raising the Antichrist. And that's technically not inaccurate, but it's very direct, very to the point. It's lacking any kind of flowery nuance to kind of disguise what might be going down. But this is my way of adding a spoiler warning to the video. It's going to be very tough for me to discuss the details of this movie and why it's so effective without giving away the awe-inspiring climax to the movie. So if you've never seen The Omen, do yourself a favor, go check it out. If you like 70s horror, it's one of the essential classics, but from this point forward, kind of all bets are off. So when I think back to a lot of my favorite horror movies from the 60s, 70s, and 80s, usually they involve an outsider or an independent filmmaker like George A. Romero or John Carpenter, Wes Craven, Sam Raimi, Tobe Hooper, or Clive Barker stepping outside of the studio system and then going off and making something that we'll never forget. And their early horror movies are low budget and nasty and iconic. But going back 100 years, we have plenty of other examples where big studios were willing to roll up their sleeves and get weird while simultaneously offering some classic horror movies, the slick production values that are only possible within the studio system. I'm talking classic Universal monster movies like The Invisible Man, or RKO films like Cat People by Jacques Tourneur, or Alfred Hitchcock when he shot Psycho in that classic location on the Universal lot, or Paramount when they hired Roman Polanski to direct Rosemary's Baby, or in the case of Warner Brothers when they hired William Friedkin to direct one of the all-time great horror movies, The Exorcist. But the challenge, obviously, when working with a big studio and a big budget is how do you make a really traumatizing movie within the studio system that can still be a mainstream success without coming across as compromised or neutered creatively. And thanks to the faith of Alan Ladd Jr. over at 20th Century Fox, The Omen became one of those movies. It's slick, it's beautiful, it stars Golden Age icon Gregory Peck, who brought an air of dignity to the film, which attracted a lot of other actors. It won an Oscar for Jerry Goldsmith's bone-chilling score, but it's also a really gnarly original horror movie that has so much gravitas and feels so authentic that a lot of fans went digging through the Book of Revelation and the Bible trying to find some of the quotes that were completely cooked up by the imagination of screenwriter David Seltzer.
From the eternal sea he rises, creating armies on either shore, turning man against his brother, till man exists no more.
And as I say frequently on this channel, if you look closely at the cast and crew of any great movie, they tend to have a murderer's row of incredible collaborators. People like D.P. Gilbert Taylor or editors like Stuart Baird. But in the case of The Omen, I think we have director Richard Donner to thank most of all for leading the charge on this movie and assembling such an incredible cast and crew for this effort. And while he was a very experienced director in the world of television at that time, this was his feature film debut and it opened the door to so many classics like Superman the Movie and Lethal Weapon. But if you watch some of the incredible documentaries out there about the making of this movie, many of which are included on this kind of lurid box set, I don't really like the latter movies in this box set, but I like the earlier movies in this box set, but pick your poison. But if you watch some of the interviews with Richard Donner, you'll see that it was his philosophy toward the material that allowed the movie to reach its full potential, because throughout the process, he always approached the film as a mystery suspense thriller where there was always a plausible explanation for whatever horrors were occurring on the screen. We never see legions of undead rising from their grave or horned demons swirling around the sky. The movie's incredibly grounded and kind of back to basics from start to finish, and consequently makes this horrific story so much easier to believe. And the approach proved to be so effective that even the Catholic Church fell in love with the movie. Speaking of which, at the end of this video, I'm going to include the audio for a podcast I recorded with Simon O'Neill a few years ago. It was actually Wrong Reel episode 666. It was the last pure audio episode of Wrong Reel that I ever recorded. It happened to be 666, and of course we had to make it about the Omen. But Simon grew up in Ireland, and he had some incredible stories to share about what it was like being a kid in Ireland, where he had a lot of Catholic priests who were basically teaching this movie as a cautionary tale. In fact, I'm going to recommend you look at the time code below and listen to that first, because it's far more entertaining than anything I'm going to say about the movie.
Pages of the Bible, thousands of them. Every inch of wall space covered, even the windows.
But as I always like to do when recording these anniversary videos, let's start with the script, because there are a few things that I like more on this earth than a good original screenplay. And David Seltzer knocked this one right out of the park. But the genesis of the story actually starts with producer Harvey Bernard, whose friend first pitched him the idea about doing a movie about the Antichrist. He then hired David Seltzer to write the screenplay, which took about a year, but the screenplay is so well written. You would think there's like some great tome out there that it was based upon, but the novelization of the story came later. But I think one of the key ingredients which made the screenplay so effective was Richard Donner's golden rule, where he said nothing was going to be allowed in the screenplay that couldn't happen in real life. No matter what weird, evil, diabolical shit might be happening in the story, there always needed to be some degree of doubt as to whether or not these events were accidental or being driven by some evil force.
Look at me, Damien. It's all for you.
Part of the clever sleight of hand of David Seltzer's screenplay is how it incorporates some details from the Book of Revelation and the references to the Antichrist, but also invents a lot of stuff just out of thin air, like this line from the Book of Revelation which says, "Here is wisdom, let him that hath understanding count the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man, and his number is 666. So that's pulled directly from the Bible. But the line that's just fried people's brains over the years is the line by Father Brennan where he says, "When the Jews return to Zion and a comet rips the sky and the Holy Roman Empire rises, then you and I must die. From the eternal sea he rises, creating armies on either shore, turning man against his brother till man exists no more." Now, if you were not well versed in the Book of Revelation, which is pretty much like the only part of the Bible that I read a lot in my Bible classes back in high school, just because I was into all that apocalyptic stuff. But if you're not well versed, that sounds like it could come straight from the Book of Revelation, but it was made up by David Seltzer, but it's incorporating little details that feel reminiscent of imagery from the Book of Revelation, specifically the bit where the Antichrist is rising from the eternal sea. So David Seltzer, he clearly did a lot of homework, but he also just put on his thinking cap and started thinking up some really horrific stuff. And I feel like that careful blend of little details from the biblical text mixed with his own imagination is what makes The Omen so incredibly powerful. But once you have a great screenplay in hand, then what you need is a good director and a good cast to bring things to life. And probably the luckiest thing that happened to this movie was getting Gregory Peck to come on board, because he'd been in semi-retirement for a number of years, but was looking to come out of semi-retirement. But once he signed on, because he's so dignified, and he'd played Atticus Finch in To Kill a Mockingbird, and had been around in Hollywood since the late 40s, working with people like Alfred Hitchcock, but he brought an air of dignity and prestige to the movie. And oftentimes, within show business, people will kind of look down upon the horror genre, in spite of the fact that it's a beloved genre and has been like the breeding ground for so many incredible filmmakers. Nonetheless, for whatever reason, people within the Hollywood community look down upon the horror genre. But once they had Gregory Peck, suddenly it's like, oh, well, now we can get David Warner, we can get Lee Remick, and we can get all these other marvelous actors. And so suddenly you had this incredible cast. It's like, wow, all right, this is turning into like a full-blown prestige production, like a prestigious drama, not just a horror movie.
Look, I'm not just some bystander. I was the one that found him.
I'm the one that's supposed to kill him. These are knives. He wants me to stab him. Wants me to murder a child.
It's not a child.
How can he know that? Maybe he's wrong.
And I should also add that Gregory Peck took a huge pay cut to work on this movie in exchange for 10% of the gross. It ended up being the highest paying gig of his entire career. So Gregory Peck, in addition to being a great actor, was also an excellent businessman. But as I mentioned before, I think the real magic to the success of this movie is director Richard Donner, because even if you have great technicians and great actors involved, you need somebody that can kind of harness all these gifts and then like get everybody marching in the same direction. And Richard Donner is an incredibly collaborative filmmaker who's not afraid to solicit the input of his cast and crew, and he's not afraid of the occasional creative dispute over the appropriate direction for the movie. And sometimes they'd persuade him to do things a different way, and sometimes he would kind of force them to see things his way. And case in point would be when director of photography Gilbert Taylor convinced Richard Donner to shoot the movie in the 2.35:1 aspect ratio, which would be quite a new format for a director coming from the world of television, where typically they were shooting in 1.33:1, and 1.33:1 is more or less a square, whereas 2.35:1 is a really wide rectangle. But the two of them spent the day messing around with the format. Richard Donner fell in love with it. And I should also add that on his next two movies, Gilbert Taylor continued to work in 2.35:1, and his next movie just happened to be Star Wars. But Richard Donner had quite a few battles during the making of this movie. One with Gregory Peck himself during the scene where the character Robert finds out that his wife has died. And Gregory Peck wanted to rip the room to pieces and smash everything. And what Richard Donner wanted was for Gregory Peck to be lying on the bed and be very calm and very subdued. And apparently Gregory Peck said, "You're wrong, I'm right, but you're the director and therefore I have to do it your way." But after the scene was shot, Gregory Peck watched the dailies and was like, "You know what? Maybe you weren't wrong after all." But another actor that Richard Donner had battles with was young Harvey Stevens, Damien himself. And apparently during his audition, Richard Donner was kind of goading him on. Was like show me what you got. And the kid just went fucking crazy and attacked him, showing a ferocity that you see repeatedly throughout the movie. And Richard Donner was like, "All right, that's our Damien. Dye his hair black and we're off to the races." But that combative relationship led to the best shot of the movie, where at the end of the movie, at the funeral for his parents, we see Damien and he turns to the camera and he was told at the time, look deadly serious, look really hardcore. But as they were shooting it, Richard Donner started saying, "Don't you laugh, you son of a bitch. Don't you dare laugh, you little prick." Just talking all this trash. And the little kid just loved it and gave us that evil smile and was like, "Oh my God, the Antichrist is back. Holy shit, the world is doomed." And also, that's another example where Alan Ladd Jr., the studio head of 20th Century Fox, showed the faith and vision in Richard Donner, even allowing that scene to be shot. Because the movie was shot on a very tight budget. They'd already used up all their money. But in the original ending, the entire family of three was going to be buried side by side. But Alan Ladd Jr. and Richard Donner were having dinner together, and they were discussing this potential alternate ending. And Alan Ladd Jr., brilliant studio head that he was like, "Whatever extra money you need, go shoot it." And he also made additional money available for Jerry Goldsmith. But we'll get to Jerry Goldsmith in a bit. I got to finish singing the praises of Richard Donner first, because from start to finish while making this movie, and even after the movie, it was just one fight after another. Like when Richard Donner apparently got into a fist fight with one of the marketing guys from Fox when Richard Donner saw the very first poster they'd cooked up for the movie. And apparently Richard Donner said something like, "Oh, this is a really shitty poster." And the marketing guy said, "Relax, it's only a movie." In any event, according to legend, they came to blows, but then it led to yet another marketing campaign, which is arguably one of the best marketing campaigns in movie history, where you have all these incredible posters placing huge emphasis on 6, 6, and 6, because there were some early preview screenings or some early access screenings on June 6th of 1976, and they just kept emphasizing those numbers. But yeah, the posters for this movie, as well as the trailer featuring the voice talents of Percy Rodriguez, were huge drivers for this movie's success.
For generations, the Thorns have been a family of tremendous wealth, position, and power. The perfect marriage of Ambassador Robert Thorne and his wife Catherine was fulfilled by the birth of their son, Damien. And then, when the child was 5 years old, something terrible happened.
But when he wasn't getting into alleged fistfights with his marketing department, Richard Donner was a really, really good director. He was great with his cast, and he was also an incredible problem solver. But he told his cast early on, nothing's going to be tongue-in-cheek, nothing's going to be ironic. Everybody needs to believe as intensely as humanly possible. And if you believe, well, then the audience is going to believe. And because the movie is performed with such sincerity, it creates this ominous feeling of dread from start to finish. You never get to kind of come up for air. But as far as the problem solving is concerned, it's incredible what Richard Donner and his crew were able to come up with. Like the scene with the baboons. Damien and his mother are going to the zoo, and in the movie, it makes total sense that as the Antichrist is going through, all the baboons are going to go apeshit. But one of the big problems of working with animals is they don't really respond to direction, in particular baboons. And so they came up with this harebrained scheme of sedating the alpha baboon. The baboon they all worship, because early on they tried putting a baby baboon in the car, and the baboons were like, fine, take him, like, who cares? But when they put a sedated alpha in the car, the rest of the baboons were like, don't you dare take our alpha, and they just went absolutely batshit insane. And apparently Lee Remick ended up getting her hair nearly pulled out of her head because the alpha started waking up, and Richard Donner was in the car shooting it. It was complete and total fucking bedlam. Probably the kind of stuff that would be very challenging to pull off in 2026, but for our viewing pleasure, thankfully, they pulled it off in 1976. Speaking of Lee Remick, there's a key scene in this movie where Damien's basically unleashed, where he nearly kills his mother. It's a fascinating scene where you see him kind of riding on his tricycle over and over and over again as the music is building and building and building, and suddenly the music gets very quiet. You just hear that little tricycle, and he rides down the hall, boom, hits the banister. Lee Remick falls, but she was petrified of falling, and she was also petrified of just getting hurt. And even though the actual fall was going to be performed by a stunt woman, they engineered this incredible apparatus where they were able to shoot the fall horizontally, so no one's actually falling, but they shot it in a way where she quite literally just pivots and turns, and they create the illusion that she's falling thanks to this shattering fishbowl. But apparently Richard Donner, he had such a belief in no actors or animals ever getting hurt on his set. They painted some dead sardines gold because he didn't even want to hurt goldfish on his set. That's the kind of guy that Richard Donner was. But if you watch the documentaries about the making of these movies, Richard Donner just tells one hilarious story after another. He's an incredible raconteur. If anything, he might have been a great actor if he hadn't been such a good director. But one of my favorite stories is about the Rottweilers on this movie. And the Rottweilers are featured prominently throughout. And anytime you see them, you know they're probably going to rip somebody to pieces or terrify somebody or make them go crazy or whatever the case might be. But during the big graveyard scene that they shot in Italy, apparently, while what we see as the audience is the Rottweilers just going berserk and attacking David Warner, attacking Gregory Peck, and it's just total bedlam. But what they were cutting out was the fact that the Rottweilers spent more time just humping each other and kind of chasing each other around than they did any of the actors or stunt people involved in the scene. And I just love how, like, you know, if you can read between the lines while watching that horrific scene, all those Rottweilers are just, like, you know, just boning away while David Warner and Gregory Peck are running for their lives. But as I keep saying, Richard Donner had a lot of secret weapons at his disposal while making this movie, and I think one of the key secret weapons that he had was editor Stuart Baird. And I feel like too often throughout film history, editors kind of get overlooked or overshadowed by the director, because the directors are they're larger than life. They're on the set. They're basically there for like every aspect of the film, from like the beginning, middle, and end, and after, and they get to hog all the glory, and they also get to, you know, absorb all the blame if the movie's a failure. But Stuart Baird was a brilliant editor, and a lot of the best scares and a lot of the best effects in this movie are thanks to him knowing when to cut, when not to cut, when to shave half a second, when to add half a second. But also, if you watch these documentaries about the making of, he's just so goddamn charming. It's like, dude, like, how are you an editor? Like, you could have been like Ian McKellen if you'd wished to, but for whatever reason, he just really loved cutting movies. And apparently when Richard Donner saw the first cut of the movie, he just absolutely hated it and thought it was going to be, you know, a biblical level disaster. But it was editor Stuart Baird who convinced him to go back into the editing room, reassemble the film, and he started helping him cook up some of the best scenes, like David Warner's infamous decapitation scene. Because usually if you're watching a horror movie, something scary happens, people go, ugh, and they kind of flinch, and then they relax and they keep watching. But usually if they flinch and look away, they're going to miss whatever horror effect you came up with. But Stuart Baird had the idea, you know, when that sheet of glass goes flying across, because initially it was apparently supposed to come down, but the glass kept leafing and they couldn't get the shot. But like, what if it comes off the back of a truck? So they set up like 7 different cameras, got it from all these angles. But as the sheet of glass goes through, they just kept replaying that spin over and over and over again. So anybody in the audience who saw that scene, and if they reacted away, when they looked back, it would still be flipping and turning. So whether they wanted the scare or not, they were going to get the full effect. But even if you have the world's slickest editor coming up with incredible sequences like that, sooner or later you need to find somebody that can give your movie its soul. And usually that comes in the form of a composer. But this movie had run out of money, and Richard Donner went to Alan Ladd Jr. hat in hand and was like, you know what? we have an opportunity to hire Jerry Goldsmith, but we need $25,000, which sounds like such an insignificant sum in 2026, but that was the rate at that time. And Alan Ladd Jr. found room in the overall expenditure of Fox to bring on Jerry Goldsmith. And I don't put Jerry Goldsmith on the level of someone like, Bernard Herrmann or Ennio Morricone, but he's like a millimeter below them, and he's got one of the most legendary careers in the history of composing music for movies. I would put him up there with John Williams. For some people, John Williams is the greatest ever to do it. I don't agree, but obviously John Williams wrote some of the best scores that we have ever heard in any era. We are blessed that we have enough great composers where we can have a debate or a fun conversation about who are our favorite movie composers. Actually, that'd be a good video. Who are my top 10 favorite movie composers of all time? But Jerry Goldsmith is definitely close to the top, and this might be my favorite score that he ever composed. But it's one of those things where for YouTube, I cannot include even a second of it, or I'll get nailed for copyright. And at one point I was thinking, what if I try to perform the theme song to The Omen? And I quickly realized it was not going to be possible. I looked up the lyrics, and I was like, maybe I can kind of sing along and let people hear it. But anyway, it was just going to be disastrous. But Jesus fucking Christ! For a movie, for a video where we're talking about the Antichrist, I guess it's okay to take the Lord's name in vain. But Jerry Goldsmith gave this movie its soul, because from the moment the movie starts during the opening credits, you're like, oh boy, we are in for a ride. It's like dun 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 dun. I'm about to make the mistake of trying to sing it again. But it's not the only piece of music that's incredible throughout. Jerry Goldsmith actually has some other beautiful themes kind of scattered throughout, like when Lee Remick and Gregory Peck are walking along with their baby and that sort of thing. There's some other stuff in there, but what everybody remembers is just that Hall of Fame theme. Anytime Damien is about to go fucking crazy or possibly cause something to happen, whether he wills it to or not, Jerry Goldsmith is there, and thankfully, he won a motherfucking Oscar for this. Too often, I feel like people look down upon the horror genre within the movie business, but every once in a while, the stars are aligned and people recognize greatness when they hear it or see it. And thankfully, Jerry Goldsmith was rewarded for his efforts, because this is one of the best goddamn horror themes ever cooked up by any musician ever. And what makes his accomplishment even more incredible, Jerry Goldsmith didn't even have access to the movie when he wrote the score. Usually if you're writing the score to a movie, you get to watch the movie and you kind of compose to the movie. All he had were some timing notes. So he just went off into his lab and saw where they needed the music and started cooking up these themes. But it was a different era, and you needed a different set of skills to create great music. But Jerry Goldsmith was one of the best to ever do it. And thankfully they were able to scrape together the necessary funds to bring him onto this movie. But I think at this point I've managed to sing the praises of the crew enough. Let's talk about the astonishing cast that was assembled for this film. And we got to talk about Lee Remick, who I think might be, and this is going to sound a little crude and vulgar, but I mean it in the most glowing way possible. She is the hottest MILF in the history of the horror genre. And this is great line in the movie where Gregory Peck, who plays an ambassador, tells her that she might be too sexy for the White House, and she is sexy in this movie. I first saw her, or at least the earliest thing I've seen her in, was The Face in the Crowd, where she was considerably younger, but where she plays the object of the affection of Andy Griffith's character in that incredible movie. But here she's a little older, and she's become more maternal. But goddamn, the chemistry between Gregory Peck and Lee Remick, you can just feel it coming off the screen in waves.
Something in mind, Mr. Ambassador?
Why don't we have a little look upstairs?
Well, there's no furniture up there either.
Oh.
Like when they're looking at possible houses to live in, Gregory Peck makes a not so subtle suggestion that they go upstairs to the bedroom. In spite of there being no furniture, kind of taking it for a test drive. And the way she responds, you're like game on. I believe they're in love. I believe they've been in love for a long time. I believe they will continue to be in love for a long time, if not for the fact that they've managed to adopt. Or she doesn't know they've adopted. He knows they've adopted. She thinks it's her biological baby, that they've managed to bring the Antichrist into their home. But another actress who brought a lot of sizzle to the movie was Billy Whitelaw as Mrs. Baylock. And apparently, as originally written in the original shooting script, the character was much more warm and kind of a traditional Irish nanny. But Billy Whitelaw, she just saw something in the character when she came to the set. She kind of changed everybody's mind. Once again, Richard Donner was a very collaborative director, and while he definitely had an idea about how he wanted to shoot the movie, if an actor or an actress or a technician had a good idea, he would listen. And so they totally changed the character, and she's just eerie, and she's trying to be warm, and she's saying all the right things, but she's just unnerving to even listen to or see on the screen. But she just does such a phenomenal job in this flick.
Have no fear, little one. I am here to protect thee.
Especially in her scenes with Damien and that goddamn Rottweiler, because obviously the dog can't act, and you're dealing with a boy who apparently was a holy terror on the set. Everybody hated him. Everybody says he was like, either spoiled rotten or causing problems, or he was just hell on wheels. Great on the screen, but just a misery to work with. So in all those scenes with the nanny, she's basically having to carry the weight of creating the sense of menace, the sense of horror in those scenes. Also, quick side note, when I mention the word horror, I know a lot of people these days pronounce the word horror. And I'm like, horror? Why do you say it horror? Because if you watch the documentary about the making of this movie, both Richard Donner and Stuart Baird pronounce the word horror, and I'm going to include those moments right here.
I always looked at The Omen not as a horror film. I felt if I pitched a horror film to myself, I didn't want to do it. And if I pitched it to the actors, they wouldn't want to do it. In my mind, I made it a mystery suspense thriller.
We had some fantastic actors. I mean, Lee Remick and Gregory Peck and Patrick Troughton and the others are in it with fantastic character actors. So we're relying upon getting the horror out of it from within them, their belief in the horror of it, their belief that this child is evil, their belief in the fact that he may be the son of the devil.
If you prefer to pronounce the word horror, more power to you. I'm not telling you what to do, but it sounds like quite a different word. But I'm on team Richard Donner and Stuart Baird. Horror, baby. But what I love about the interactions between the nanny and Damien is that you're never quite aware of, to what extent is he aware of his malevolent destiny, who he's destined to become. Because anytime she's talking about how she's here to protect him and look after him and accomplish all of his goals, blah, 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 he'll just look at her, but it's in a very ambiguous, mysterious way, and I feel like they did a really good job of getting the perfect shots from this actor. I doubt the actor knew what he was achieving on the screen, but it's just absolute gold. Whether he's looking at a church in horror as they approach and his eyes are kind of going wide, or when he looks at the Rottweiler and gives it that little wave after his first nanny has managed to hang herself. It's all incredibly eerie stuff, but it's definitely one of the best performances by a child in the history of the horror genre, and there's a ton of great competition on that front. I feel like if there's one genre that is known for great performances by children, it's the horror genre. But the last actor we have to mention is, of course, the great David Warner, who only died a couple years ago. But when it comes to Hall of Fame character actors, I'm getting chills even thinking about David Warner. But you can come up with people like, Harry Dean Stanton, or these people that are kind of renowned for being great character actors. But David Warner, he gave us solid gold performances from the 60s up through the 2020s. And if you look over on IMDb, he's got 253 acting credits. I can't even begin to keep track of all the incredible performances he gave us over the years. I mean, just recently I decided to replay the classic video games Baldur's Gate and Baldur's Gate 2 Shadows of Omen, which came out 25 years ago, and there he was as the main villain, Irenicus, even in one of the greatest role-playing games of all time. There's David Warner delivering a Hall of Fame performance, even though he's just a couple pixels on the screen, but he was pure dynamite.
Your actions affect so many others than yourself, you will come to realize how little choice you have. You will do what you must, become what you must, or others will pay for your cowardice. You will accept the gifts offered to you.
My favorite performance by David Warner is probably in The Ballad of Cable Hogue, directed by Sam Peckinpah, which is quite a different movie from The Omen. But in The Omen, he and Gregory Peck, they were just born to work together. They make the perfect team where they have different skills and different knowledge that they bring to the table. And during a lot of scenes, which could have come across as really clumsy exposition, because this movie has to feed a lot of exposition to the audience to help you understand what the hell is even going on.
The sea that constantly rages with turmoil and revolution. So the devil's child will rise from the world of politics.
I feel like the reason the scenes work so well is that we're getting David Warner and Gregory Peck just kind of dancing around each other, trying to unpack this diabolical scheme that's about to bring about the end of the world. In any event, a day finally came when the cast and crew had finished making all their contributions, and it was time to market and promote this movie. And I feel like when it comes to like business school case studies about how to market and promote a movie successfully, This is one of the great examples because, as I mentioned earlier, Richard Donner got in a fist fight with one of the marketing execs, but they brought some other people on board. And between the posters and the trailer and this kind of almost conspiratorial like rumor campaign behind the movie, they managed to drive the anticipation of this movie up to a feverish state. Because this was one of several horror movies that tried to cash in on the idea that there was a curse plaguing the movie throughout the production. And depending upon to what degree you believe in conspiracies or superstition or curses or whatever the case may be, maybe you'll believe, maybe you won't. But there are a lot of accidents and unexplained phenomena that took place during the filming of this movie. Like at one point, Gregory Peck and the screenwriter David Seltzer, they were flying on separate planes to the UK at the same time, and yet both planes were struck by lightning. Maybe it's a coincidence. Maybe it was God saying, don't make this movie. In any case, if you're lucky or cursed enough to have a curse on your set, well then, yeah, you want to use that to help promote the movie when it's finished. And when I look at some of the posters they cooked up for this movie, it makes me hate the subpar posters of 2026 all the more. I feel like almost all of our posters these days look the exact same. It's a bunch of floating heads. It looks like, like some unpaid intern got put to work with some mediocre Photoshop skills. But these posters are designed for maximum impact. And as a result, The Omen ended up being one of the highest grossing movies of 1976. And this was a year that had a lot of healthy competition on the front. Number 1 was Rocky. Number 2 was A Star is Born. Number 3 was King Kong. Number 4, Silver Streak. Number 5, All the President's Men. And number 6, The Omen. And after that, you had Bad News Bears, The Enforcer, In Search of Noah's Ark. I've never even heard of that. And Midway at number 10. But when you look at that box office of $28,500,000, it doesn't sound like all that much. However, keep in mind, the budget for this movie was only $2.8 million. They spent more on the advertising and promoting, but nonetheless, a very profitable movie. But it led to a trilogy, including The Omen 2, as well as The Final Conflict. I watched part 2 and part 3 many times on HBO as a kid, but for whatever reason, it took until I was in college before I finally saw the original Omen, but we've also had subsequent attempts to reboot the franchise. I feel like the less said about those movies, the better. Keep your attention on the original movie, and if you love the original movie, obviously watch the second and the third to complete the story, but I've seen the original movie now many, many times over, and for me, it's part of the great unofficial kind of devil trilogy or religious trilogy of the late 60s up through the late 70s, and for me, that would be Rosemary's Baby, The Exorcist, and The Omen. And there's something about horror movies that take religion seriously, that make you believe, that just give them a little bit more impact and a little bit more power than they would have otherwise. So maybe I've said enough at this point, and it's time to cue up Wrong Reel episode 666, which I recorded in October of 2023 with filmmaker Simon O'Neill. It was my last audio-only podcast for Wrong Reel. I still keep the Wrong Reel brand alive, but it was a hell of a lot of work creating all those episodes for Wrong Reel, but it felt like a very fitting number with which to end the audio-only era of Wrong Reel, 666. And Simon O'Neill proved to be an incredible dance partner, telling us all sorts of, or telling me, I say us, telling all of us some incredible stories about the way they rigorously studied this movie in Ireland once upon a time. So hope you enjoyed that conversation. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, please consider liking, subscribing, hitting that notification bell. But more importantly, as always, onwards and upwards.
He's looking at you, kid.
I'm Charles Foster Kane!
Hey, Stella!
Suck on this.
What is happening, everybody? This is Wrong Reel episode 666. It's a podcast for hardcore cinephiles where we tackle everything from Jean-Luc Godard to Jean-Luc Picard. And today, I guess we should just start with a line from the book of Revelations. Let him that hath understanding count the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man, and his number is 666. Mr. O'Neill, we just might crack the world in two with this episode, but welcome back to Wrong Reel. How the hell are you?
Yeah, I'm very good. Thank you very much. Beautiful, lyrical, liturgical introduction there to the episode.
Yeah, I fluffed the line, but that's all right. I'll do a little finessing in the editing and hopefully remove my stutter. But yeah, I drink too much caffeine, and stuttering is a natural byproduct. But this is an episode you and I have been talking about doing. I think you put your name on it, or you laid claim to it like a year and a half ago, and then earlier this summer around June when we were doing quite a different topic, when we were diving into the world of classic English literature. Well, I basically realized, all right, I've got to plan my episodes very carefully so that I can have a 666 episode for Halloween. But here we are. The stars are aligned and the world is ready to end.
Yeah, like the Star of David, but it's on the other side of the earth. It's on the
Absolutely.
European side, signaling something evil and dark. And yeah, I mean, I remember whenever that was, I was kind of almost jokingly saying to you, you know, if Wrong Reel manages to keep going to 666 episodes, well, then we've got to do an Omen special for 666, number 666, because it is a film I saw as a kid. I mean, a lot of people saw it as a kid, and it scared the bejesus out of me. Like, you know, The Omen is, I'm not saying by any means The Omen is the scariest horror movie that's ever been made. Of course not. There's lots more scary, but it's certainly the horror film that scared me more than any other film I've ever seen or ever will see, because I saw it at a time when, you know, I was impressionable and young, and now I'm old and cynical and jaded. You know, it's just
But
that
it still
hot
works.
spot.
I rewatched it the other night, and I was like, God damn, this movie still plays. I love the acting. I love the music. I love the writing. There's just so much about it to praise. And it's the beginning of at least the filmmaking career of Richard Donner. He had been a TV guy, but without this, we don't get Superman the movie. We don't get Lethal Weapon. We don't get all of his other major achievements as a director. So yeah, lots to praise about this. But one thing that's going to add even more gravitas or more kind of import to the occasion, this is actually going to be the very last pure audio episode of Wrong Reel. Wrong Reel is transitioning into a video podcast, and I feel like what better number to end the audio era with than 666. And I've been checking on like Spotify and on YouTube and on iTunes, figuring out which platforms will allow video podcasts to be published. But I finally realized recently, for the same amount of work, I make a lot more money doing video, videos and or video interviews. And so Wrong Reel will continue, but there'll be a brief hiatus as I get kind of all my ducks in a row. But 667, whatever it ends up being, it will be in video form. So stay tuned for the innovations and changes coming to the world of Wrong Reel.
Well, that's great. I'm delighted to be bringing the dusty cobwebbed velvet curtain down on the beautiful audio era of Wrong Reel with this homage.
There's no
to,
other big numbers to look
classic.
forward to. It's like, I mean, what's better than like bringing something to an end with the end of the world? Like, do you have any favorite quotations from the Book of Revelation that kind of mark the occasion properly? I've got a giant webpage open up here of all these different quotes from the Book of Revelations, because my only Bible class that I ever took was my senior year in high school, and I basically would sit in the back of the room like this little goth kid, just rereading the Book of Revelations while everybody else was talking about all the other topics that were up for discussion. So I remember at age 18 really enjoying the Book of Revelation, but I've not revisited it since.
Yeah, no, I mean, the one about the whore of Babylon was the one that came out. I don't have the quote to hand, but I remember all right. I remember going to the Book of Revelation after seeing the film,
Gotcha.
The Omen, and peeling it up and kind of, you know, reading it with the sense of horror. That,
yeah, it's like fucking Lord of the Rings.
Isn't...
If you just read the Book of Revelation, it's really graphic. Like, here's a great sample. And another angel, a third, followed them, saying with a loud voice, "If anyone worships the beast in its image and receives a mark on his forehead or on his hand, he also will drink the wine of God's wrath, poured full strength into the cup of his anger, and he will be tormented with fire and sulfur in the presence of the holy angels and in the presence of the Lamb. And the smoke of their torment goes up forever and ever, and they have no rest day or night. These worshippers of the beast and its image, and whoever receives the mark of its name." So yeah, if you listen to this episode, you are effectively becoming a worshiper of the beast and its image, and you are going to hell. So yeah, Simon, all responsibility rests on your shoulders for all these souls that are doomed to eternal torment.
Yeah, the other one, I did find that one. It was like, "Come, I will show you the punishment of the great prostitute who sits by many waters. With her kings of the earth committed adultery, and the inhabitants of the earth were intoxicated with the wine of her adulteries." And then it just goes on about all the punishment that the whore of Babylon is going to have imposed on. Yeah, I mean, I ate that stuff up when I was a kid, you know, because it was... Well, I was in Catholic boarding school.
Pause. I know you got a big story to tell, but we also have an announcement for you before we dive into that. What is going on with the Dispensary of Death, Irish television, your filmmaking career, etc.?
Good point. Yeah, well, it's kind of a nice stars aligning confluence of Halloween stuff because, that little short that we did, The Dispensary of Death, is on Irish television on Monday week. So it's funny that they've picked it for Halloween. Like, it's on the 30th of October. It'll be on at about 11 o'clock, 11:30, going into the 31st. So my Halloween sort of thing on RTE, if anyone is listening in Ireland, they can watch it on the 30th of October on RTE, and it'll be on the RTE player after that. Anyone who's got a VPN can get into the RTE player, or rtplayer.ie or whatever it is, and watch it there. And and it's kind of funny. I've got a Halloween episode with Ron Reel and a Halloween movie on the television.
Absolutely. So what was that phrase you just used? You said on Monday week. I don't think I've ever heard that turn of phrase before. Does that mean like a week from this coming Monday?
That means a week from Monday. We say Monday week. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. So,
gotcha.
Yeah. Monday week. Monday in a week's time. And but it's done its little sort of festival run, and it's won a couple of awards for us, and which was kind of cool because I got it won a festival in Spain, which is the Cortes Festival do Imaginaxiario in Ponteverde, Spain.
Very cool.
The nice thing about that was I got a bust, and it's kind of like a devil. It's kind of like a big bust with like spikes, and usually you just get a piece of glass with your name on it, but this is like actually a piece of art, and I got €500 for that, which is
nice. Hell yeah!
Well, which is
money.
Bonus. Won a couple of other sort of, I thought one of them was kind of funny. Most amusing film was kind of in the B beside the sea for, most amusing or stuff like that. But and it won Best Irish Short at the Ennis Fantastic Film Festival inaugural this year. So we got a decent sort of festival run out of it, considering it was done pretty much on the cheap. And and I've done another one since that I was just editing there, and before you rang me, the actor in it, Keith, who's the same actor from The Dispensary of Death, he's like, texting me saying, "Where's the goddamn movie?" As people do when you're kind of juggling a load of things and trying to get it out. So that's cool. I'm looking forward to seeing it on the telly, and it's kind of nice bookend to a journey when you kind of do that, and you get a few quid for it as well, which kind of helps pay for the movie.
So when can we, speaking of people saying like, I want it and I want it now, when can we look forward to the directorial feature film debut by the great Simon O'Neill?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, just piece all the shorts together, you've probably got like an anthology Kentucky
fair
Fried Movie kind
like
of thing. But yeah, no, as I say, I think the thing is, I mean, I'm writing a feature at the moment, so God knows whenever I finish that, I will, and I know a lot of people, obviously, in the business over here through ads and everything who are, directors of photography and all that. So yeah, I might try and work something out,
And how did you get those gigs directing those shorts on YouTube recently about like rugby players and things like that? Do you want to plug and promote those, or is that more like work for hire stuff?
Well, yeah, I mean, it is worth, like, what it is kind of like, I mean, it's all stuff, like, it's like, like writing. As I was saying this morning, I was interviewing this chef who's quite well known in Ireland for the paper, for the Times and Sunday Times, and it's all in a day's work, but it's all it's all writing. It all helps, I think. But yeah, just that was we were proposing to do some video for the Land Rover stuff. And essentially, didn't have the budget to hire anyone decent to do it, so I did it. It's kind of one of those things where you're like, okay, how can we make this on the cheap? Like, you put it out to a load of production companies, and they come back with a couple of $100,000 budget, and you go, okay, well, we don't have that, so here's an idea. I'll do it.
Yeah, so that $200,000 we were thinking about paying a director. Well, we can just take that out of the budget if I step up to the plate and do it myself.
Yeah, and also it was the kind of first time we'd kind of done videos since the pandemic. pandemic, like we put out for a couple of things, and we're trying to get back into, you know, like digital and video and stuff like that. So we kind of did it in house, but you know, we'd hire like the cinematographer. The guy who shot it was the guy who shot Dispensary. It was
nice.
Kevin. So you know, we can kind of, you know, you get some work around because people might have, you know, done you a few favors with like sound mixing and stuff like that, so you can kind of get them back into.
Also, it's just great practice. I mean, Ridley Scott talks all the time about how before he ever shot a feature film, he probably had shot 1,000 commercials. And it's like, yeah, I'm sure not all 1,000 of those commercials were artistically fulfilling and satisfying experiences, but goddamn, he had a lot of experience shooting film before he ever actually shot The Duelist. So I feel like, yeah, anytime, I feel like directors too often have long hiatuses, if that's even the plural of the word, in between projects, where it's like, yeah, David Lynch always was happy to do a ton of commercials and music videos. Same with guys like Errol Morris. I just feel like, yeah, if you're a filmmaker, you must make films in order to get better at your craft.
Yeah, I agree. And, you know, those things were... They were good fun, but they were kind of stressful, and you know, like whatever, getting early. But like, so the when you step into that world, like, it's just an endless series of compromises, because you know you're doing it for, you know, it's someone else's dime. So you know they have a call on, like, you might think this thing looks really amazing, and they're like, yeah, I don't really like that, and you're like, you know, you can't turn around and say, well, fuck you then, because
you're wrong, fuckface.
You're wrong.
Taking
even though
my
they
movie
are
elsewhere.
wrong. Yeah, even though they are wrong, you know, and you can usually go off and do a director's cut or something like that. But it's not the point, and it's kind of like, it's funny because I hadn't been back in that world for a while, and then did we did this short film in April with Robbie and in Robbie Ryan, who, you know, the poor things, like for a couple of days we shot this movie in Paris, and it's kind of as I said, I might have mentioned it in the last episode, but it's not the most original story. It's this couple go for a meal, and he's in Paris, and the guy wants a steak really, really well done, and the chef is like absolutely refusing to cook the steak the way the guy wants it. So, you know, it's kind of forward and back.
Yeah, I think the chef is right. Yeah, if you want your steak well done, you just deserve to be dropped into an abyss somewhere.
Exactly, just go to fucking McDonald's, you know. Yeah. But like the whole. You know, it's just a silly comedy movie, but if there's a point to it, it's like, how far are you prepared to compromise with your art? Like, is the chef right? Is the customer right? Who's right? That's the kind of thing, you know. I thought it was just funny.
If a customer wants to eat a loafer, they can just take it off their foot and just dig right in. But yeah, I've got a family member who will go unnamed, where burgers, steaks, whatever, everything always is very well done. And I'm like, all right, well then, whatever nutrition or flavor might have once been in that poor animal is long since expired. But that's the way they like it. For me, I like it. I like to be able to see the beating pulse flowing through the flesh as I chomp down every morsel. So.
Yeah, I don't eat meat anymore.
Really?
So, and it was funny. No, yeah, I don't. And it's funny because the guy,
is that a recent thing, or?
Like it's a good few years now, like 5. So I eat fish, and I mean, I would have a steak, maybe, I don't know. I haven't had one for a long, long time, but I mean, yeah, I eat fish anyway. People's dietary very, very boring, but Keith, who is in the film, is vegan, you know, so we were like putting steaks in front of him. That, I mean, you know, and the whole idea of the film is obviously that the steak is kind of blue, so it's blood coming out of it and everything, and he was like retching in between scenes. It was quite funny. Nice. You know, just torturing him there, and
all for the art.
We had all for the art, yeah, and we had to knock up some imitation meat and stuff like that. So yeah, I agree. I mean, if you're going to have a steak, I'd be the same. Like, I mean, I don't smoke anymore, but like, fortunately, when I stopped, vapes didn't exist before I stopped smoking. You know, I would be like, if you're going to smoke, just fucking smoke. Smoke Benson and Hedges, Gold, absolutely. Smoke Carol, smoke John Player, Blue, you know, smoke proper cigarettes. Don't smoke these like pink, you know, purple. Yeah, no, when I see kids
things, like sucking on a piece of plastic that tastes like bubble gum and like exhaling vapor, I'm like, just go to a goddamn cigar shop and do it right. Like, grow some chest hair and enjoy your tobacco.
Yeah, like bust out that hookah pipe and just get bubbling. But that's weird. And I live on a kind of pedestrianised street, and it's the new scourge. I just see them like everywhere on the ground, on the floor. Is these like, you know, vape, these pink and purple and, you know, kiddish kind of colors just getting around, single-use plastic.
I had a brief career as a smoker in my late teens. I was at a boarding school where if you got caught with drugs and alcohol, you'd be expelled immediately. But tobacco, they would allow you one strike. So I was like, all right, well, that'll be my vice until I get caught, and then I'll just quit. And so, yeah, I've got a sentimental affection. Also, I grew up in Virginia and North Carolina. It's tobacco country. I mean, it's just like R.J. Reynolds was, their name was plastered above our school cafeteria. I was like, all right, so tobacco paid for our cafeteria. When I was in kindergarten, we went to the Philip Morris factory where they make all the Marlboro cigarettes. It basically was like, this is a source of community pride, like this giant factory creating all these cigarettes that are killing people around the world. But, you know, there are some other fringe benefits from living in tobacco country. But anyway, so we smoked our Marlboros and our Camels without irony as teens. We loved them.
Yeah, I mean, again, I had a brief career as a smoker. I mean, I'm delighted that I don't smoke anymore. I don't miss it at all, you know. But like, again, it's one of those things where I worry about censorship, you know, in all its forms, and there's a lot of kickback in it, you know. And I sometimes, because obviously in the UK, they're trying to bring in this thing that it's like going to be a non-smoking country, like, you know, they brought in this ridiculous law that that people born now will never be able to buy cigarettes, like, you know, so you're like gonna have to have older people go and buy them for you and some. And I'm wondering, is it the next, you know, is it the next battle in film censorship is going back to the old black and white movies with Bogart? And
like removing the cigarettes from the title sequence from the big sleep.
Yeah.
It'll just be an ashtray with like nothing in it. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, they're not good for you, but cigarettes are fucking sexy. And when people are when Bogey and Bacall are lighting each other's cigarettes and handing them to each other, yeah, that is in 1946. That was the only way you could watch people make love on the big screen. But while we're talking about our childhood history and things that we experimented with, maybe now's as good a time as any to dive into this experience you had, this transformative experience you had when you first encountered the Omen back in a bygone era.
Yeah, so it was kind of a weird, like, it was kind of, in a way, the perfect way to see it, but in other ways, like, obviously a terrible, deeply traumatic way to see this film. You know, like, it's a scary film, and it's always like, and I was used to seeing horror films, but, you know, it's one, like, when you see something like The Omen, and you're kind of used to, like, sneaking up, staying up late watching Hammer horror films, and they're kind of scary, but they're kind of like, it's all, you know, gothic castles, and, you know,
it's not grounded in reality at all, whereas The Omen is present day.
100%. And but yeah, so we lived in England for a while, and then we came back when I began primary school. So that was like, you know, because I was thinking, how old was I? And I was 11 years of age. And it's kind of weird because usually when people would watch a horror film, like, you know, obviously it's an 18s movie. When you watch a film that you're not supposed to watch, you would have sneaked it out or something like that. But the weird thing about it is we were showing it in school. You know, the powers that be said, yeah, this is going to be a good movie to show. Yeah. So what happened? We used to. I mean, this is a sort of bygone era before mobile phones and the internet and everything. So, like, just long hours of boredom. It was like funny. I was listening to your Howard Hawks thing, and, you know, like, you were mentioning, like, whenever there was sporadic bits of violence, you know, and that, you know, a lot of hanging around and then sporadic bits of violence, which is kind of like reminds me of my school days. But, like, you know, the whole, you know, a lot of sort of nothing going on, and then, like, you know, something intense, and then whatever.
A wooden rod across the
buttocks.
Wooden
rod, or a you know, a duster in the face or something like that, or, you know, coming across the classroom just to wake you up. But so it was kind of set up because in the UK it's all very, you know, it's very secular and very kumbaya and very, like, harvesty and everything. And then you come back to Ireland and you're walking around, there's, like, religious statues everywhere and candles, and Catholicism is so theatrical, you know, it's all about incense and fire and smell.
Oh,
and,
yeah, it's great spectacle.
You know,
it's part of the reason it's been so successful. It's like from architecture to music to paintings to stained glass windows, you got to put on a big show. And there's a reason why all those folks in the Vatican wear all those robes. It's like, it makes it all mysterious and fascinating.
Exactly, it draws you in, you know, and it's very seductive. And to young kids, and that's all part of it. They would always show me the boy and I'll show you the man, or whatever, or get them when they're young, essentially. So because obviously there was long weekends of not a lot to do, they would show us movies. They had an old 16mm projector, and so outside the school, it's weird. I just looked up yesterday. I was like, I wonder, is that building still even there? So there was an old converted stables, basically just a long, drafty old stables. And that stables was divided into 3 different sections. The first section was the woodwork room. It's where we did woodwork and all that. Sorry, my light's gone off. I get up and turn it on.
I feel like it's strangely appropriate for the podcast, for people who are just listening, because it's audio only. Simon is enshrouded by darkness, almost like he's bringing some sort of messages from the other side.
Hang on a second. What it is because I had my heater in, because my boiler packed in there last week. So I had my heater going before I came on to you, because my house at the moment is kind of like the, there you go. It's kind of like the set of The Exorcist. Nice. You can see my breath in front of me because my heat and pat. I mean, I came out. I was out watching Ireland get defeated again at football, and came home and my heating wasn't working. I was like, God, what a day. But as I was saying, all these shelves here are sort of behind me. We were discussing them earlier.
Yeah, your bookshelf is looking because you can always tell some people have bookshelves where they just put books up there for decoration, and some people who have bookshelves that are organized. And a bookshelf that is organized is just much more pleasing to the eye. Those books look well thumbed, well loved, and very well curated.
Yeah. Oh, thanks very much. But I made these bookshelves myself when I moved in here, just with planks of wood, because I like woodwork. But I learned woodwork in school, and one of the good things that I like to do. So the first section of this building was the woodwork room, and then the middle section was where we boxed. It was the boxing place. So now I had a very short boxing career, 2 fights, 1-1. I won one, lost one. And
hey, at least you don't have a losing record, so yeah.
Well, exactly. I won my first fight, and then kind of went on. You go up a level then, and the whole I was in school one day, and again at a boredom, someone comes through and goes, who wants to box? And I put my hand. Oh, right, you're okay. And then you said, right, next Friday night you're boxing Willie Fitzgerald at 8 o'clock. You're like, you never had a glove on. You've never had anything. There's no training. There's no sparring. You're just thrown into a ring like a bunch of savages to beat each other to a pulp.
Chin down, hands up, bite down in your mouthpiece, and let nature run its course.
That's it. It's Lord of the Flies stuff. So this room had on 4 corners, had the the posts embedded in concrete into the floor with the hooks on them, and the ropes would go on them, and then the ropes would be taken away, and it was just an empty hall, and they put seats in. And at the back of it, there was a projector, and they would show us movies. And then the third part was the church, was a chapel. So the weird thing about it was, when you're thinking about it, and I have no idea if it's still a chapel now. It's probably a multimedia center or something like that. But at the time, it was a church. So they'd show us these movies at night. And I watched quite a few movies. I remember movies that they showed us at school, like The Silver Streak was one of them, the Gene Wilder one with Jill Clayburgh, which is fantastic, hilarious. I loved it. And Rocky, they showed us the Rocky movies, but they showed us the Omen. And because the projector was at this end of the sort of boxing room, it was projecting it onto the chapel wall, if you know what I mean, which is kind of obviously sacrilegious of itself, but
it makes the movie strangely more powerful as well.
100%. And what makes it more powerful is we would never know what they were going to show us. The film would just start. It's we all go in, and again, it's a pre-mobile phone era, so nobody's faffing around on their phone, because a bunch of 11-year-old kids.
You got a captive audience. Yeah.
Captive audience, nothing else to do, bored. It's also, they would show us the films at 8-9 o'clock at night. So, I remember it being winter. I remember it being around this time being dark and kind of going into this room and lots of shuffling around. And then the movie started, and it was The Omen, and I was 11 years of age. And this is this is the authorities thought this was a good idea to show us this film. I remember years later thinking, possibly this was like a recruitment movie that they were kind of getting us in, trying to scare us into becoming more devout, although I would have thought,
if you want to prevent Damien from ruling the world, you better start going to church.
Exactly. You need to step up to the plate. And the funny thing is, I did start going to church. Like I was kind of like,
my brother had a similar thing where my brother, I don't know how spiritual is these days, but when we were kids, every horror film seemed to like reinforce his religious fervor. And so, but I feel like horror has lost some of its oomph as we become increasingly, a less religious culture, at least here in America, where I feel like in the 70s, movies like The Exorcist and The Omen, I think, or even Rosemary's Baby in the 60s, hit especially hard because of the religious component. And when I first saw these movies, I was, still singing in the chorus and going to church on Sundays and that sort of thing. So when the spiritual aspect of a movie feels authentic and hits hard, it makes the movie just like strangely more powerful, much more powerful than somebody in a hockey mask stabbing people while they're doing the business.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, and as you can imagine, if you're living with all the trappings of Catholicism in a very religious school, like the school I was in, if you didn't go to mass on a Sunday, you'd be expelled, if you were found not to go to mass and stuff like that. And I remember probably after seeing The Omen, I decided I was going to go to mass every day for Lent, and you go to mass every morning. I would get up 7 a.m, go to mass, or wherever it was before school, and then the thing is, the priests notice that you're going, so they kind of will take you aside and maybe guide you, and then from that I got made they call it a sacristan, which is like you've got the keys of the room at the back where they have the hosts and the wine and all that sort of stuff, and so you're a roadie for the priests, when they're getting ready to go on tour, and you're getting your stuff together. I mean, later on I would be cracking into the bottles of wine in third and fourth year and stuff like that, but just for that 1 year in first and second year, and I think The Omen had a big influence. But anyway, we watched the movie in this freezing cold barn in the middle of nowhere, and it just absolutely terrified me. And again, you're watching it, you're thinking, my God, this is it's so real, and again, it wasn't that, we're talking the 80s, it wasn't a million miles after the film had been made. It was a good few years later, but not that far. It was still very relatable. And as I say, the thing about The Omen is it's very practical effects. It's not over the top. It's credible.
All you need are a couple of Rottweilers and a great score, and you can make a movie about the Antichrist. If they made it today, there would be all probably a beam of light going into the sky at the end, and the Avengers would show up and they'd have to battle the devil and his armies and that sort of thing. But I feel like this movie is just a masterclass in showing how beautiful photography, some killer music, and obviously it helps if you've got Jerry Goldsmith. If you don't have Jerry Goldsmith, I don't even know if this movie works. But if in terms of effects, it's just a couple dogs. That's all they have in terms of effects. And I'm jumping ahead a bit, but when I was watching this documentary, The Omen Revealed, the making of, Richard Donner was laughing about how those dogs were so fired up and ready to go. They had to do everything in their power to cut around the fact that half the time the Rottweilers are all just fucking away in the background of the shots because they were just so amped up. They're like, all right, well, if you're not going to let us kill something, we're going to have to just hump each other to death. And so, those Rottweilers apparently were ready for their moment on the big screen. And so one way or another, they were going to get their rocks off.
Yeah, absolutely. That's all you need for the tension is a bit of dry ice, a few dogs and all that. But yeah, just to wrap that up, what was funny for me was the film finished and everyone was quiet and everyone was fucking terrified. And again, had it been now, people would just get, within 2 minutes or before the fucking film had finished, some smart arse would have their phone out and go, oh, that quote, it wasn't even from the Book of Revelation. And, all the stuff would come out, but we were just left there in sort of awed silence. And then after the film, we went next door to the chapel for evening prayer. We went for prayer, and it's about 11 o'clock at night, and we're all filing.
I don't want to go to hell. Ah!
Yeah, well, we all file into church, and we're all really quiet, and there's a really fucking tense, upsetting atmosphere, and the priest's kind of and Father Donovan, Dickie O'Donovan from Cork, gets up. He was the dean of the school, and he says, well, now that film that you saw now, that's not a film that I would have personally chosen for you to watch and everything, And then he says, but it's important for you boys to remember that the devil exists and he's out there. And I was like, no! Oh my God.
Wow.
It was like we were brought in there and he was laying it down and he was saying, yeah, fuck around and find out. That's the way it goes. And like this was even almost worse than the film. And of course, went to bed, complete sense of panic and mischief, and people too excited to sleep, and just kind of all sorts of shenanigans going on. And then getting up the next day, we all had a Bible, we all had a catechism. So I go to my Bible, and of course I scroll to the back, and I read about the whore of Babylon, and I read about the fire and the angel who's been cast out of heaven and thrown down to hell. And I'm going, it's all true. It's all true. I'm walking around in a daze.
It's in the book. It's right here.
It's in the book. It's in the holy book that we had to study, And I mean, I don't think any film can ever affect me like that film did. As I say, I became a pious little bastard because I didn't want to be, smoten down.
Well, it's one of those rare horror movies where the last few seconds are so simple but so devastatingly powerful that if you're going to try to make a successful horror movie, the last few seconds need to send people out of the theater in a state of just stunned silence. And that last shot, which was a recommendation from an executive, from Alan Ladd Jr., it shows you how even the suits sometimes have good ideas. But he had the idea of showing that Damien had lived, because originally it was left ambiguous. You didn't know if Gregory Peck had killed Damien or not. But to have Damien turn to the camera, and apparently Richard Donner was directing the boy, which is like, don't smile, like don't laugh, don't you do it, you little fucker. And the little kid's just sitting there, and he slowly but surely, he can't help himself, he starts smiling. But that's the take they end up using, because it's actually a bad take, which worked in beautifully with the story, because oh wow, Damien, because throughout the whole movie, like, does he even really understand what's going on? Like, to what degree is he complicit in this grand conspiracy? And when he smiles at the audience, looking right into the camera, like, oh my God, he knows! And it's just, it is awe-inspiring. It's so powerful, so effective.
Yeah, absolute genius. And as you say, just a fantastic recommendation from Alan Ladd Jr. He describes how he showed him the movie, and he was like, oh yeah, it's really great, yeah. And then they were having dinner afterwards, and halfway through the dinner, Alan Ladd Jr., obviously Alan Ladd's progeny, said, oh, anyway, you can have the kid live at the end, and Richard Donner went, oh my God, what a fucking great idea, which is kind of funny, it's good, he wasn't like, oh no, you're not fucking with my movie, or you're going to do that. He was like, oh my God, why didn't I think of that? That's a fucking genius idea. And then so he hit him up, said, any chance we can get a few quid off you? Because at this stage the movie had maxed out. It cost 2.25. I've heard between 2.25 or 2.8 million, depending on what you read.
Which is hilarious. Like in an era of $300 million disasters, the fact that they made this classic for $2,225,000, and it feels it's just solid gold. It's got all the trappings of a giant Hollywood production, but it's a very modestly scaled film.
And that 2.25 million includes Gregory Peck's and Lee Remick's salary. Includes the stars, who are big names. And I read,
and $25,000 for Jerry Goldsmith. It's like, pay Jerry Goldsmith $25 million, but you got $25,000 for writing that legendary score, which he won an Oscar.
Yeah, absolutely. And the special effects budget was $25,000 on this movie. Which is just staggering,
quaint. Yeah, it's quaint.
And Richard Donner got paid about $150,000, and because I was listening to the commentary, and they've got Stuart Baird, the editor, on it there, and he would go on to edit, he's edited Skyfall, Casino Royale, loads of movies and everything. This was his big break, as well as it was Richard Donner's big break, because they had another editor on it for about 4 or 5 weeks, and it just wasn't working out. And this was the editor, I can't remember his name there, I have it written down somewhere, but he edited The African Queen, that's how far,
Gotcha,
that's how much
old
of an
school.
Established old
school.
With
horror, the editing, the difference of a quarter of a second can make all the difference in the world of whether or not a shot sends evil tremors up your spinal cord or is unintentionally comic. And I just feel that's where all the magic happens on a horror film. And also, I should mention, as I was watching that documentary, but behind the scenes, hearing Richard Donner pronounce the word horror as horror, not horror, gave me put a big smile on my face. I feel like the word horror is an endangered species and it's going away. Everybody seems to pronounce it horror movies now. I cannot do it. It's just it makes my face hurt. So at least Richard Donner knew how to pronounce my beloved genre the proper fashion. I'm assuming then that you're from across the pond. You pronounce it in a similar fashion to Richard Donner.
Yeah, horror. Yeah. I mean, that's horror.
Yeah, where did this horror bullshit start? Where did it get started? Like, I think the first person I remember really saying it and really leaning into it, I was watching an interview with Elijah Wood, and he was talking about, and you're making a horror movie. Blah. I was like, horror? I was like, who wants to say it that way? Yeah, fucking horror, baby. Lay it on me.
It's the horror. It's Brando at the end of Apocalypse Now. It's the horror. Yeah. I mean, and this is one of the all-time absolute stonking best that was ever made, and so it sets Stuart Baird and Richard Donner changed their career, changed their lives,
100%. Yeah, I mean the fact that he goes from this into making Superman, a movie which for a lot of people remains the best superhero film ever made. Paul Verhoeven's like, it's the best superhero film ever made. Of course, I didn't see any more superhero movies after that, but that was enough. And then but Superman the movie fucking rules. And but it didn't come out of nowhere. Richard Donner had a ton of experience making all kinds of television. At some point, I should probably go back and just see what were his formative years, because his movies, I feel like being born in 76, his movies dominated so much about my childhood, whether that's The Goonies or Lethal Weapon or Scrooge or whatever. Just it was every few years. And I wasn't even aware of him as a filmmaker by name until deep into the 90s, but his movies were just so naturally, attention grabbing. I ended up seeing pretty much all. I think the only one of his movies that I have not seen, whatever he made right after Superman, but all the kind of crazy crippled people hanging out in bars.
Yes. I remember him talking about it, but I haven't seen that one.
Yeah,
either.
It's called Inside Moves from 1980, and apparently he regards it very fondly. But I saw The Toy on TV as a kid. I had no idea it was a Richard Donner movie, but it was Richard Pryor, so I watched The Toy. Lady Hawk, Goonies, Lethal Weapon, Scrooge, Lethal Weapon 2, just boom, boom, boom. Every single movie he would make, I would end up watching.
Superman 2, which, the Richard Donner cut, which was taken away from him there. Scrooge, Becky Gianna favourite there,
yes,
I see.
Indeed.
And but I was reading that because he started in television and he made a lot of television. He made Petrocelli, which was fun. I used to get called Petrocelli in school. People said I looked like him because I had the curly hair and whatever, and they thought they were slagging me off. They
should have called you Damien. You got that curly hair.
Well, see, that's another thing about The Omen. I kind of looked a little bit like that when I was a kid.
Nice.
I had black hair with the ring. When I would see The Omen, and I think there are a couple of different types of horror. There's the kind of horror there where there's something out there in the woods and it's going to get me, and I need to barricade myself in here and I need to defend myself. There's an evil, but it's out there. And then there's the other kind of evil where it's kind of like,
the evil's in here with us.
It's in here, but it, not in the room with you, but inside you. What's that funny birthmark I've got? I always think, because I remember going to Munich when I was 17 to spend the summer working, and I went there a couple of times, and I really like Germans and I liked hanging out there, but they have this, kind of, I always thought, what's that moment in class where you're just breezing along and, you're learning about history and it's like, oh, okay, World War II today, and you kind of, suddenly you're like, what? We were the bad guys, and there's a thing about The Omen is as you say, is the kid really aware? Does he have agency, as they would say today? Or is it oh fuck, I'm the Antichrist, I'm going to cause all this terrible thing to happen? So that's another kind of, again, it's like The Exorcist, that's internalized horror. It's you can do nothing about it, you're just evil.
Mom, as I'm watching it, there are moments where I feel like Damien is in on it, where when he first meets his handler, and she's like, don't be afraid, and he just kind of rolls him and he's kind of looking at her and he's kind of taking her in, and I just feel like, whether I have no idea if the kid was aware of how good a job he was doing, or if it's just all in the editing when they just found those perfect takes to really make it seem like to keep it ambiguous. But it seems like in Omen 2, he finally finds out what's going on. When he sees the tattoo, he has that scene where he's rattling off dates when his history teacher is challenging him on his knowledge. But it feels like in the first one, he's at least aware of some dark destiny. And like when he rides his tricycle into his mother, like, is he aware of what he's doing? Or is it just, it's a very delicate tightrope walk that the movie's, it's keeping us in doubt about the degree to which Damien might be complicit. Because at the very end, when he's like, Daddy, no, my heart goes out to the kid. And it's a weird thing where I find myself more often than not in these movies rooting for Damien, and obviously he's not supposed to be the hero, but there's something about when he just like will stare at somebody and the music kicks in and then something horrible happens. It's one of those rare situations where the movie just finds a way to get the audience on the side of the end of the world. And I think that's another part of the genius of the movie, is that I find myself cheering from every step of the way. When they drive up to the church and they show that great close-up of his face where he's just looking at the church with like dawning horror as he realizes where he is, right before he just spazzes out like a fucking wild animal. Yeah, I'm on Damien's side. Like, I don't want to go to church either as a kid.
Yeah, I mean, it's you do sort of feel for him, because he's kind of having to, and in Omen 2, because he's a teenager, he leans more into his evilness. But I mean, I think part of the way that they got Gregory Peck on board was to say, oh, well, this is just a guy who's going insane. He's kind of, he thinks, I mean, I was listening to Donner explaining that, and it's not really true, but it's kind of credible. Like, this could just be a bunch of coincidences.
It could just be a mystery.
Over the edge.
Yeah, and I think Donner wisely chose to pitch it to a lot of his collaborators and cast as a mystery, just because for whatever reason in the 70s, in spite of the fact that the actress has made more money than like any other movie fucking in history at that point. I mean, people were just, it was just a runaway success, but there was still the stink on the horror genre. So, but if you pitch it as a mystery, like a supernatural thriller, well, then you can lock down Gregory Peck. And once he got Gregory Peck, all the other actors fell into place. And it's like Gregory Peck brings so much dignity to the movie, and he's so serious, and he's so sincere in so many ways. And I feel like without him playing it straight, then the movie would fall to pieces. And Donner said to all of the actors, like, we're not going to wink at the audience. We're not going to kind of, if you don't take it seriously, the audience will take it seriously. And I feel like whether you're doing superhero movies or horror or whatever the case may be, any sort of escapist fantasy of any kind, if the actors don't believe it, then the audience is going to, just totally ridicule the movie. And so, yeah, Gregory Peck, goddamn, I feel like he's, as much as Jerry Goldsmith gives the soul to the movie, Gregory Peck grounds it, makes you believe every step of the way.
Yeah, he has the gravitas that just like, and it's from an era where they would make these, you could kind of call it middlebrow entertainment, like where it's kind of, high concept middlebrow stuff, but just do it with the utmost sincerity. And like he really throws himself into it, and he exactly, there's no point doing a film like this if you're going to do it like you're just sort of like taking the piss out of it. And then after that, it was kind of funny because I was looking at what he did after this. He hadn't worked for a while, and then they were like, oh my god, once we got Gregory Peck, it was amazing. And then he did a few years later, he was doing The Boys from Brazil, and he was Dr. Joseph Mengele, so he's like really leaning into these evil characters. And then a couple of years after that, he did this one, The Scarlet and the Black or something like that. It's about a priest called Monsignor O'Flaherty in Rome during the Second World War, and it's actually a true story. And he saved lots of allies who came down and managed to get them shipped out. But actually, Catherine O'Flaherty, who's a producer here in Ireland and is a great-granddaughter or something of this character from the Gregory Peck movie. Yeah. So, but I always think it's funny that he, after playing the father of the Antichrist and Dr. Joseph Mengele, he's like, oh, okay, I better play a priest now just to kind of get back in the old good books with the
absolutely
man above.
Well, let's slow down and just focus on the genesis of this project. What can you tell us about how it originated? Who wrote it? Because, as I mentioned before we started recording, up until about a week ago, I always just assumed that this movie was an adaptation of a novel, because so rarely do we see original screenplays in the horror genre that create like a setting with a sense of lore, with a sense of history. Usually it's a very superficial experience. You got a bad guy picking people off, or a phenomenon's picking people off. You got to solve the problem and everybody moves on. But this movie, it feels like it's like a window into this like ongoing struggle that's been going on for centuries, and it's very rare for like an original spec script to have this much depth to it and this much complexity and this much like richness of detail where you can kind of scratch at the surface and find additional information and additional topics worthy of study. So what do you want to say about the scribbler behind this unique production?
Yeah, it's kind of funny because when I saw it, I didn't know either, and I presumed that it was from a novel. But there was a novelization. I think it was done by David Seltzer, but I could be wrong about it. But there was
Which
a
was
novelization.
a big part of like the marketing for movies back in the 70s,
100%.
where you would always do a novelization of the movie because there were no VHS cassettes. So if people wanted to take home like the movie with them, novelizations was one of the way they would do so.
Yeah. Oh, and I sought it out after seeing the film. I had to read the book, and I read The Omen, I read The Omen 2, and I read The Omen 3, The Final Conflict. I actually haven't seen The Omen 3. I've never gotten around to watching it.
Sam Neill, baby. Yeah.
It
was released
I know.
initially as just The Final Conflict, but no one knew what the fuck The Final Conflict was, so then they had to add in Omen 3, The Final Conflict. But for whatever reason, because my older brother was so terrified of the devil and vampires and all kinds of spooky supernatural stuff as a kid, the Omen series always loomed large in my household because if your older brother's afraid of something, then you're afraid of something. And so, he was petrified. But he was also fascinated, and he kept watching all these goddamn movies over and over and over again.
Yeah, so I actually remember reading. I actually remember enjoying Omen 3, the book, the most because in Omen 3 he's an adult, and there's actually a sex scene in it, which again,
absolutely,
back in school there wasn't any internet, so you're like,
you gotta rub the dirty pages with your fingers.
Exactly.
Does it end the same way where Sam Neill is like looking up at Jesus and says, "You have won nothing" as he dies?
I don't know. I haven't seen it. I haven't seen the film, as I said. Like, I've never gotten around to watching it. Like I've seen the Omen 1 and Omen 2 many times, but it's still on my list, the Sam Neill one. But
I think
the book
Final
is
Conflict
racy.
is fine. When I was little, there's a lengthy sequence in the middle where Damien has all of his followers murder all the male children born in a certain region between certain hours because that is going to be Jesus reborn.
Yes.
And I remember as a
that
kid
from
just
the
being
book,
petrified
actually,
by like all these like kids and like in their baby carriages being like
Prams,
pushed into traffic and that sort of thing. So, but I'm glad that I saw it when I was like 8 because it really hit me hard. Rewatching it the other night, I was like, you know what, this is not that scary. But Sam Neill definitely leans all the way in as he was ready to go to the dark side as Damien.
Yeah, but as you were saying, how it came about. I mean, I didn't know this, but there was this guy called Robert Munger, and it's funny because he pops up in the documentary, and there are a few religious consultants. You know, it was like this guy Robert Munger was an evangelical Christian, and he was a friend of Harvey Bernard, who was the producer. And I think Harvey Bernard, interesting character, obviously himself and Donner had a kind of love-hate sort of relationship. It's funny when they do the director's commentary, Donner saying, "Oh, you're going to see our producer here now. You'll know him by his natty sense of style." And you just see this kind of big American wearing a check plaid shirt walking across the road. And it's when Gregory Peck goes to the American embassy. They just got him as an extra in all that. But Harvey Bernard was chatting to this guy Robert Munger, and he was like, "What if the Antichrist had already been born and he was amongst us and he was walking through the earth and nobody knew it?" And Harvey Bernard, because I read up here, he produced a couple of movies before this, but he actually produced The Mac. You know that.
I know The Mac. It's
maybe
my favorite blaxploitation flick.
Exactly. If there's one thing tougher than being the Mac, it's staying the Mac. You know, that's a Harvey Bernard movie. You know, so he was obviously a kind of guy with an exploitation eye, an eye for like kind of trashy but cool ideas that you could turn into a few quid. And he was like, "Oh, that's a really interesting idea. Yeah, my God." And so he commissioned this guy, David Seltzer, to write the script for the movie. And then Seltzer spent like a long time, he didn't dash out this sort of, he had the story, the bones of the story fairly quickly, but he put this, he did a lot of, he delved into the book of Revelation, and it's like, he was saying that, now we all know 666. It's wrong, real 666. But like, it's because of this movie,
Totally.
It
cut right through the culture. I remember throughout my childhood, anytime there's a weird kid in class, you're like, "Oh, that kid's he's fucking Damien." Like even people who'd never seen The Omen knew who Damien was. They knew what 666 was, and that's it's so rare for a horror movie to like leave that ripple effect throughout the culture where everybody suddenly knows of this name and this symbol, even if they don't understand like the context. So yeah, that is one of those like one of those top 5, top 10 horror films that just somehow really captured the imagination of the population. And that's when you know something is really making its mark, when people understand it or are familiar with it, even if they never plan on watching it.
Yeah, and I mean, like in popular culture, like there's the Pixies song, "This Monkey's Gone to Heaven," and it's like, if the devil is 6, then God is 7. And the whole idea that 6 was an evil number, a sort of incomplete number, and 7, it's like it's a magnificent 7, it's lucky 7, it's a lucky
prime
number.
Yeah, it can't be divided by any other number.
Yeah. So using all these elements, they made the spec script, and it was the usual story, turned down by every studio, including 20th Century Fox, who ended up making it in the end. But somehow, because it wasn't that expensive, and they were able to do it on, as we said, on that sort of like shoestring budget, where they were sort of almost begging along the way to get it made. But I don't think they had any idea that it was going to be, the smash that it turned out to be.
I mean, it was a grotesque success where it grossed over 60 million just in the U.S. alone. So anytime you're making a movie for 2.225 and it grosses 60, that's serious money. that is just fine.
And that doesn't even take into account, like, renting it to sort of obscure boarding schools and, sending it like all around VHS. And I mean, it must have made a multiple of that many times over, like over the next kind of couple of years when the VHS
I think
market
someone must have
everything.
realized early on that that there was a chance it might break out, because I'm reading here that they spent $2.8 million marketing it. So they spent just as much more marketing it than they did making it. And they suddenly started releasing, like, really like plugging like 666 and making people aware of that. And I guess they'd learned a lot of lessons from Jaws recently, but they really had just understood how to capitalize on the mystery and the mystique of 666. But also, just like people do fear the end of the world, or some people look forward to the end of the world. But these are like deep, primal, universal themes that anyone can relate to, whether you're religious or not. And it's just that one of those rare $1 million ideas. And it makes me wonder, like, where are those original screenplays now? Where are those original writers? Like, everybody's doing like the 30-second Marvel movie or live action remakes of Disney classics. I'm like, write the fucking Omen. Go out and write something original. But what's interesting is hearing how the author and Richard Donner had a few creative battles over the nature of the script, because Donner wanted a little more ambiguity. David Seltzer's like, no. He is the son of the fucking devil. Like, we have to make it abundantly clear that there's nothing in doubt. And I think this is a rare situation where the writer was fucking right. Like, Richard Donner probably would have made it a little bit maybe too grounded or too accessible. I think he was just so afraid of being kind of put into the ghetto or into the corner of just like trashy horror movies. He wanted it to be respectable and prestigious. But I feel like here, David Seltzer, he really understood, like, you're putting the devil in the movie, make him the hero, and you're off to the races, and it fucking works.
Yeah, I think you're right. The creative differences worked because from Seltzer was pushing it that way, but Donner was like pulling it back. Like, so he I heard an interview with him, and he said, "Look, when I got the script, it was all warlocks and cloven hooves and tails, and fuck that shit." And they took all that out.
Yeah,
like, so it's implied. It's all implied. It could just be, Billy Whitelaw could just be crazy. We know the motivation. Like, again, it's why I prefer The Omen to The Exorcist. I know they're great movie. Like, for one, it's the one I saw first. It's like that old Oscar Wilde quote: "Your friend aren't necessarily the people you like the most, are the ones that got there first." Same with the horror movie. The one that you see at that impressionable age will become the one that really freaks you out. And I mean, I was in my 30s when I saw The Exorcist, and I'm like, this. It's just not like seeing it when you're 8 years of age.
Yeah,
and
I saw when I was 10, and it has never removed its hooks from my brain. So
yeah, but it also has, there's the point where it loses me a little is the sort of, the pea soup and the projectile vomiting and stuff like that. Kind of, the effects that are a bit over the top. Whereas with The Omen, it's all, I mean, it's ultimate low rent practical effects, like really cheap practical effects, music, not too much sort of.
But so devastating. Once Billy Whitelaw's character, Mrs. Baylock, enters the scene, and I guess like the way she enters the scene is by they got to get rid of the pre-existing nanny, and I'll never forget the first time I saw it where the Damien's nanny locks eyes with this dog at this party.
Yeah.
And then suddenly you hear this voice like, Damien, this is all for you. And she's standing up in the windowsill and she jumps and she hanged herself. But I can remember, and I'm getting a little shiver of it right now, like just that evil chill, like winding its way up my back, like into like cold dead hands wrapping around my spinal cord. It was so just her tone of voice and the framing. And I mean, once again, it doesn't cost a lot to do that sort of thing, but just a masterclass in creepy, eerie effects. Jump scares, there's nothing less impressive to me in the horror genre than a jump scare, because it'll never be scary again. But even before we started recording, you sent me a little gif of that girl jumping out of the window and hanging herself. And it never fails to give me a little evil shiver, just because the first time I saw it, it filled me with paralyzing fear.
Oh yeah, it's terrifying, and it's the moment when the movie's on, and that is Jack Palance's daughter, Holly Palance.
Oh, cool.
That is, yeah. So Richard Donner worked in TV a lot, and he did like Streets of San Francisco and stuff like that, and he did a TV series called Bronx. I've never heard of it, but Jack Palance is in it. And Jack Palance said, "Oh, you're going to London to make a movie? My daughter lives over there, Holly. Like she lived in London for 8 years, so." He got her to play the part of the nanny. It's Holly Palance, and she's brilliant. But I mean, unfortunately, she has to be, put. And you get the devil dog and the music, and then Damien giving the dog the little wave afterwards.
Yeah.
You're kind of like, oh, is he just like cute doggies? But you mentioned Billy Whitelaw. Like the hilarious thing is when she presents herself, as the new nanny, and it's like, well, where did you find her?
Yeah,
I didn't find her anywhere. Where did you find her? And
she's like the agency, and you're like, what the fuck's going on? Everything about her is super sketchy.
Exactly, and it's like how the internet has ruined everything, including movie. Like if it was now, you'd be like straight onto her LinkedIn profile and go, "Well, hey, Mrs. Baylock, it says here you're apostate of the devil, like you're a Satan worshipper. What's this all about? Come on." But like she could just walk into like the ambassador to the US with like a faked up reference.
Ambassador
like, this will be
the
fine.
American ambassador to
the American ambassador to Britain, and hand him some dodgy faxed piece of paper, and they just go, yeah, I'm sure this will be fine. I'm sure it'll work out fine.
That tone of voice that she strikes, that like the ultimate kind of calm, maternal, soothing, soft voice, where nothing about it on the surface should feel terrifying, but somehow Billy Whitelaw, she finds that undercurrent of dread that she adds in there, where it's like, the more sweet and kind of wholesome they pretend to be, the more diabolical. But what I love about that, with her the way she expresses herself is so reassuring, that when you occasionally get like the extreme close up of her making like her devil eyes when she's like about to kill Lee Remick, you're like, oh my god, like she contains multitudes within her, and she's this is one of those rare roles where Billy Whitelaw really got to show off her range, and perfect home run. I don't know where they found her, but she fucking crushes this movie.
Yeah, she's absolutely amazing. I mean, it's like, Mrs. Baylock, I thought I told you to get rid of that dog. The dog keeps, every time he's like trying to assert his authority over the house.
When Gregory Peck comes into the bedroom in the middle of the night, and he's
on the window,
and the dog just sitting in the windowsill. It's like, Jesus fucking Christ, this dog. Yeah, like this is a devil dog. But in a way, I'm such a dog fanatic. I would almost like become a devil worshiper if it would allow me to have a few big ass Rottweilers kind of in my bedroom at all times, like protecting me from people who might be coming in to check me out in the middle of the night. So yeah, I'm a big fan of all of Damien's puppy dogs. They are absolutely beautiful animals.
Yeah, they're gorgeous, and Damien's taking quite a shine to him, sir, and all that. It's kind of funny. She just like, and then when he's like, I told you to get rid of that dog, she's like, oh yes, he's going in the morning, sir, and you know this is bullshit. But Billy Whitelaw was Samuel Beckett's favorite actress, and
gotcha.
she played, and when they made The Omen, she was in a Beckett play at the time, so they had to get her out by 6-7 o'clock in the evening, so she could be in the Strand
like a 4-hour
Theatre.
Fucking play.
Yeah, exactly, doing a monologue in a dustbin with her head sticking out the top of it, But yeah, she was she brings that really kind of off-kilter, sort of avant-garde thing to it that just really works.
And the passive-aggressive way that she will push back. When Lee Remick says, like, have Damien prepared, like dressed and ready to go to church, like, in 20 minutes. And Billy's just trying so hard, or Mrs. Baylock's trying so hard to very gently in her own way to kind of outmaneuver the mother. And, you know, Lee Remick's having none of it. And she's just like, have Damien ready, blah, blah, blah. And I love how it's such like a great old school dynamic between husband and wife where Gregory Peck, he doesn't intervene at all. He just asks like Lee, she's like, well, why isn't Damien ready? Like, but this is her domain. She's got total control. And this is a battle that she is determined to win. But we see how slowly but surely she just keeps getting kind of cut off at the knees. And watching Lee Remick slowly but surely fall into pieces to the point where she's going to a psychiatrist and talking about how she doesn't even think the baby's hers and that sort of thing. Like, it's a brilliant performance by Lee Remick. And I love her in things like, we talked about A Face in the Crowd years ago on this podcast.
Her debut nearly, yeah.
Yeah, she's incredible in that. But goddamn, Lee Remick, no actor is phoning it in. No actor's delivering any like a subpar performance. It's a who's who of brilliant acting talent from Gregory Peck to David Warner to Lee Remick. I mean, everybody is just crushing it. And of course, even Harvey Stevens, barely an actor. He's like 5 years old. Performance of a lifetime. Even if he didn't necessarily intend to do so, somehow they were able to coax out of him this astonishing performance.
Yeah, like I read that with Lee Remick, they actually shot the scenes with the psychiatrist, her talking to the psychiatrist, but they didn't use them in the end, and
Gotcha.
I don't think they're available for it. And they also shot some more stuff with Billy Whitelaw at the at the end where he kills her, and she's like getting the old knife in the throat and all that. And apparently, when Gregory Peck then staggers out with the kid to the car to go to the church, the fucking dog gets out the window and attacks him, and then fucking Billy Whitelaw attacks him again. So he's just like, oh my God, just having the horror. And Richard Donner just said, yeah, it just fucking went on forever. Like, it was like, okay, kind of need to speed things up, getting to the end and all that. That was the sort of the editing, just hurry it along. But which were great decisions, but it would be nice to have seen those scenes all those years later that they decided to cut out of it. But everyone is amazing. Every part is fantastic. Even and especially the other guy, Patrick Troughton is the priest. The kind of insane priest who's running around.
Father Brennan,
Father Brennan, Bishop Brennan. He's just so good. He was Doctor Who. He was the second ever Doctor Who in the Doctor Who TV series back in the 60s, and he was
with that
in
extreme close up of his face as he's about to get skewered. Is one of the classic iconic shots in horror, just looking up as your death is coming down towards you, and he fucking sells it all the way.
He sells it so well. I mean, you watch it and you're like, no, and you realize by the time you said this, you could have just stepped to the left and whatever, but he's obviously transfixed, and he realizes that his time has come. But did you read how they did that stunt? It's like, so your man John
they had like on like a line coming down or whatever, or
they had a wire coming out of him, like a wire, and then the spike was just a tube. It was like, we took a tube, like a tube wrapped in sort of black paper, and then they had another sort of one hiding behind his back, so that when the spike hit him, they could drop the other one into the ground. And you see, they kind of reverberate, but it kind of works, because it's just like it's hit the ground.
It's never at any point is my suspension of disbelief challenged in any way, shape, or form. I buy it. Like, they bring in these fucking hovercrafts to create the wind, and the moment you see him walking along and the wind kind of being like buffeting him from all directions, like, yep, the devil's gonna get him. And I just love how like. This movie just makes you fucking believe in supernatural magic and power and that sort of thing. And it's so simple. Just a little bit of wind and a few little details, and just, I guess I cannot say enough about the score. What would this movie have done in the absence of a genius like Jerry Goldsmith just creating this iconic score? Because I feel like, maybe perhaps the whole movie would have just fallen to pieces. I don't know.
Yeah, it's hard to know. It was... It's won him an Oscar. He'd been nominated for 12 times or something.
Because there are not a lot of horror movies that use Gregorian chants, but this movie uses Gregorian. But some of Gregorian chants just make it seem so like primitive and so kind of like old school. It's like it's steeped in some sort of old school tradition, like mysteries that we can't even really truly fathom.
Yeah, I think that's what's brilliant about it is like first, as you're saying, you go, oh, this isn't a book. Like it's actually an original screenplay, and then you're like, when you listen to the music, you go, oh, he's obviously ripped. Is this not old music? Like it sounds like something.
Yeah, you went
from
to
the
some
Middle Ages.
satanic black mass outside of like the Vatican and like heard this music and transcribed it and that sort of thing. Like, it's coming straight from the belly of the beast.
Yeah, like it sounds like it could be one of those I'd Wise Shut party, which is funny because in the whatchamacallit, the director's commentary, he's like going, oh yeah, here's the sequence that Stanley Kubrick stole from me. When we have the kids cycling through the bicycle with the sort of 70s hair and the carpet and all that, and you're like, yeah, I guess that is pretty close to The Shining.
Yeah, I mean, The Shining was shot in the UK only like a year or so later, 2 years later. So I'm sure in that Kubrick was chasing a hit and he knew he wanted to make a hit in that particular genre. I suspect he must have seen this movie just to know, just to be aware of the trends, what is popular in the horror genre right now. And I guess Marcus Penn needs to unleash some side-by-side comparisons.
100%. And there's something as well, like all the special effects are practical effects, which is fantastic. And that means it doesn't age because, CGI ages terribly, but practical effects, they're there in camera. He was talking about how they did the scene with probably heard the story, but it's how they got Lee Remick to fall. When Damien knocks her off the bike, then she's hanging onto the banisters.
Yeah, they shot it horizontally as opposed to vertically.
They had the stunt woman, but because he said the idea was that they were going to put her on a crane and drop her, and she said, "I'm not fucking doing it. Enough already."
Yeah, she's heard about Ellen Burstyn's back problems on The Exorcist when she got her butt bone destroyed by being yanked backwards.
Yeah, so she said, and he was like, don't worry about it being a rig. And she's like, look, I'm not fucking doing it. So like, okay, what are we going to do? And they just did the classic old thing where they put the floor up against the wall, the parquet floor against the wall, had her on a dolly coming in on essentially like a record turned, like a wooden disc. So they had her standing on the disc, turning it around. So she kind of falls like this so that she lands head first on the board. And
but what really sells it is that we see the fishbowl fall first in like extreme slow motion, and because then it echoes that. I think if they just shown her fall in isolation, people are like, wait, that's kind of weird, like what's going on there? But because they set it up with the fishbowl falling in extreme slow motion, and then sardines painted orange, like they didn't want to kill. Richard Donner had a strict belief that no one should get hurt or killed making a movie, and I think that's probably a fair assumption to operate under. But there's something about seeing that fishbowl fall first while she's still hanging on. She's like, Damien, and then she lets go. Yeah, it's yet another masterful scene. This movie's got like 3 or 4 masterful death sequences that none of them feel the same, and none of them feel half-assed. They all are devastatingly powerful.
Yeah, it's brilliant, and the goldfish bowl as well, as it looks fantastic. It really sells the distance, the jump. It's also an edit point. It's like we want to get from her face to the stunt woman, and whatever, and we need a cutoff point.
Of course, I always hate when I watch movies where people can't do pull-ups. I've been, for whatever reason, since I was a teenager, I'm obsessed with doing pull-ups. I can do a lot of pull-ups. I always like when I see like an action movie and somebody's like hanging and like they can't pull themselves. I'm like, you're an action star. Do a fucking pull-up. Like I refuse to believe. Yeah, and it's like if I'm about to fall to my death, sorry, I'm gonna pull myself up, no problem. I'm like, yeah, that's what you get for having no fucking grip strength. So
and the if you look at her when she does hit the ground, the one reason that that it's against the wall is the rug beside her. The tassels are hanging like this.
Oh, gotcha.
It's not, because they haven't sort of glued them straight.
Yeah.
So gravity is pulling it towards the ground, even though she's supposed to be flat on the ground. But I mean, obviously you wouldn't notice unless it was pointed out to you because you're in the moment. And she's totaled, and the Damien's little brother is also put out to pasture there from that little satanic moment.
Yeah, he doesn't want any rivals. So how does a movie as bleak as this become a crowd pleaser? Because every step of the way in this movie, the good guys lose. Like Gregory Peck's son is murdered in the crib and then replaced with this child born from a jackal. And then we see all these innocent people being, disfigured and murdered along the way. I mean, David Warner gets his goddamn head chopped off in, heartbreaking slow motion at the very end. Gregory Peck mowed down by cops who think that they're doing the right thing. And yet somehow this movie translates to crowd-pleasing entertainment, big box office. I feel like all conventional wisdom from people in suits would say, oh, well, you got to find some way to give the audience a breather and throw them a bone, let them exhale. This movie never lets you exhale every step of the way. At every turn, the devil and his followers win.
Yeah, it's weird, isn't it? It's just and it's strange that our perception is always oh, the studio fucked it up, they made you put the happy ending. But in this, it was the studio executive Alan Ladd saying, no, the kid lives at the end. We want the audience
and
to go out.
And he's going to be holding the hand of the president. The status quo is shrouded in darkness moving forward.
Yeah, so it's hard to know. I mean, I guess what possibly helps that, even though it is relentlessly bleak, is there's a couple of things going on. One, it's a love story. This is how it was sold. It's a love story between Lee Remick and Gregory Peck, and they all.
And I'm just going on record. Lee Remick is the sexiest MILF in the history of the horror genre, and 100%. I think Gregory Peck even has some comment "You might be too sexy for the White House." The way he says it just always makes me howl. But she is she's maternal and motherly, but jaw-droppingly beautiful. I mean, just oh my God, Lee Remick is a vision of loveliness in this movie.
Yeah, and when he says that, they throw the coat down like they're going to fuck there on the floor, and then the commentary, Donner goes, "Man, maybe I should have cut before that."
Yeah,
a bit too much.
Gregory Peck. But, I imagine he uses great grammar even during the physical act of love. He answers the phone "Oh, this is he." His grammar is impeccable from start to finish.
Yeah, but at the beginning, you've got the love theme. You've got Avi Satani, but you've got the love theme, and there's that scene where they're out walking along the riverside, and it's where's Damien? And suddenly he's not there.
Yeah.
And you're watching and you're thinking, why couldn't fucking Damien drown and the fucking innocent little kid in Don't Look Now, that other 70s classic, live? They could have swapped over the two of them there. That would have the whole world would have been better. And then suddenly he appears from behind the tree, and it's oh you little scamp.
But even then, early on, oh no, what might have happened to Damien? And I'm sure most people going into this movie knew exactly who Damien was going to turn out to be. But I think that's part of the magic trick of this movie, is that we find ourselves rooting for the son of the devil, the Antichrist, every step of the way, right up to the moment where Sam Neill is telling Jesus, "You've won nothing," as he gets stabbed in the back at the end of Final Conflict. Spoiler alert: Jesus wins, and the lamest moment in the entire series is this kind of phosphorescent, glowing image of Jesus, 15 feet tall, kind of looming over Damien as he dies. But we haven't really articulated any criticisms of the original film yet. I have one knock against it, and I think the only thing that saves the knock from hurting the movie is David Warner is so good. But there's a 20-30 minute stretch where I feel like this movie goes into almost a pure procedural, where it's an investigative story, trying to really figure out what went down, how are the babies swapped, et cetera and so forth. But I remember the first time seeing it, nothing scary's happened for a while. I think that's my only real criticism. I feel like if you are tired, sleepy, whatever, maybe that might be a point where you might emotionally check out. But otherwise, I really have no major criticisms of the film in terms of its execution.
Yeah, I think it's fucking brilliant. One of the best horror movies ever made. Pretty flawless. I would agree with that. It's funny. I hadn't seen this film in a long time. I had to fight through deep trauma just to watch this for the old Ron Reelers. I put myself through a traumatic experience. But I bought the DVD a while ago and has commentary on it, and some of those features that you sent me, they all end up on YouTube. And I popped it into the VHS, and it starts, and it's Rome. And he's driving to Rome, and you're like, what the fuck? And it's just like a Polischetti. I've been watching loads of those Polischetti movies, those Umberto Lenzi ones and whatever, and it's like a 1970s Polischetti. And then it gets into the horror. And there's so many, I noticed so many things watching it this time. So when he first, it's shot in Shepperton. when he first gets the news that the kid is dead and, what he's going to do, it's actually filmed from above through a set of banisters. And you're like, oh, okay, there's foreshadowing here because these banisters are going to play a big part in, poor old Lee Remick's demise later on. And there are things put in and, shots that pay off later on in the movie. But that sequence, I actually love that bit where Gregory Peck and David Warner, again, it goes back into Polischetti territory.
It almost becomes like a buddy movie, and it helps because you're seeing two actors from two completely different generations working together so fucking well. Their chemistry is incredible.
It's amazing, and it's like that almost is throwing the audience a bone, because a problem shared is a problem halved, and Gregory Peck says, nope, I'm going to fucking handle this by myself because I'm Gregory Peck and I'm going to do it and it's my problem. And then David Warner says, well, I'm afraid it's my problem too, because he's caught his reflection in the mirror and he has the little line going through his throat. So they're kind of thrown, they both have an overwhelming urge and need to find out what's going on, and becomes a little police procedural.
But when Gregory Peck seems like he's going to chicken out and he's not going to go through with murdering a child, I love how David Warner's like, well, if you're not going to do it, I will. And right then, extreme slow motion, pane of glass. And I love how in the documentary behind the scenes, they said they needed to make the death scene last just long enough because when the glass shoots out, everybody goes, and they cover their eyes. Richard Donner said he suspected most people cover their eyes for 3 seconds, 3 full seconds, and then they will look again. He wanted the head to still be somersaulting for when they uncovered their eyes, so they would appreciate the big death scene. And the head, it's bloodless, so it does look a little fake, but it's so clever and so elaborate and so over the top with that pane of glass flying out. I love that. If you're gonna kill David Warner, make it as epic as humanly possible. And it's like the head gets like 4 or 5 flips, and it's fucking brilliant.
Yeah, it's so balletic, and I mean, again, as you say, with the 5 seconds, it helps when it's super slow motion from fucking 6 different cameras, and you're just showing it over and over and over again, like for the horror. And then they cut fairly quick to the lady screaming and Gregory Peck with his hands over. I mean, it's brilliantly edited by that guy Stuart Baird. This film, it's really there are certain scenes where he's like, you've no coverage, or he wrings every bit of sort of horror from those big sequences, and that's fucking, I mean, it's iconic. The head looks a bit sketch, but the fact that it's physically real, like that it's a dummy with it just works. And they're saying that what they hadn't accounted for was that when the body went backward this way, the head would spin like a bowling. It's just too perfect.
Yeah,
and I think they only did 2 takes in it. And
some of the best things that happen in movies happen by accident. We're like, oh my god, like we're genius. But it just you never could anticipate that the head would cooperate so beautifully. I'm looking at my notes here, and I'm seeing that much like how we planned this out like a year and a half in advance for have our 666 episode land just in time for Halloween. But apparently this movie. It came out on the 6th day of the 6th month at 6 p.m. just to make sure that everything kind of, harmoniously came together for the promotion of this movie.
In 1976.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, it couldn't be 66, but it was still ended the year, still ended
1
in
month
6.
to the day before I was born. I was born July 6, 1976. Wow. So who knows? Maybe I've got a tattoo. Actually, there's no chance I've got 666 tucked away underneath my hair because I've been going hairless for like the last 13 years. So I guess my dreams of being the Antichrist are over. But I remember as a kid seeing Omen 2 Damien, or is it Damien Omen 2? Whatever the title is for the second one, being very jealous that the kid knew so much about history. I was like, he's putting that teacher in his place. He knows what he's doing.
It's like he's acting just like a teenager would when he kind of gets a little bit of like, I mean, if you were a teenager, like Lance Erickson is in that, pulls him up like because he's showing off a little bit too much and
Henriksen
too flash. Henriksen, yeah. He's
like, he's basically he chastises Damien for showing his hand prematurely, and Damien still is not, even though earlier in the movie we see Damien doing that thing where like he'll stare at somebody and like, something terrible will happen. Like he's not quite fully aware of what his power signifies. But as far as I'm concerned, you can basically just leave Damien, Omen 2 and Omen 3, The Final Conflict alone. The movie's so perfect on its own, and I like the fact that if you just watch the first movie, that final scene, you're like, oh, well, of course Damien's going to rise to power, and through the president will gain incredible political influence, and the world, like the future is mired in darkness. I hate how the final conflict lets the world off the hook. Jesus wins at the end. It's like, well, that's not a horror movie. That's like like Christian propaganda movie. Like, give me a movie where Damien fucking wins. Like that's what how the final conflict should have fucking ended. And that's why the final conflict made 1/3 the box office. If you're gonna go see a fucking Omen movie, you want to see Damien kicking all kinds of ass.
Yeah, you want to get the bejesus scared out of you. Like,
did you ever see the remake from the early 2000s?
No, and it was made by John
Moore.
John Moore, yeah, he's Irish. He's from Dublin. Like, I mean, I know loads of people who've worked with him and everything, but yeah, that's not a film I need to see. It's
I worked indirectly with him.
Manchurian Candidate remake. I don't need to see.
He had an associate producer or an assistant named Peter Vaverica in the early 2000s, who was one of the people that would occasionally give me work as a reader, because I was for like a 2 or 3 year period. I was writing coverage reports where basically, whether it's a book or a script or whatever, you write a little synopsis and whether or not you think somebody should acquire it, blah, blah, blah. But I did a few readings for Peter for scripts that had been submitted to John Moore for consideration to direct. But when The Omen was made, he had an upcoming interview, and I got this weird assignment that said, look, would you be willing to read the questions that he's going to be asked and just write and kind of spitball some possible answers? And I have no idea if he used any of my answers or not, but I was like, all right, fine, like send me the questions. And so even though I had not yet seen his remake, I was helping him with some of the research or some of the answers that he might be conceivably asked by the press or journalists or whatever. So it was one of the stranger assignments. But I was like, yeah, I'll take your money. And I'm sure I wrote complete and utter nonsense because I was like 25, 26 years old and I didn't know my ass from my elbow. But yeah, if somebody's offering you cash to write answers to questions, you'll cook up answers whether the answers make sense or not. And so anyway, that was my one my one John Moore story.
Yeah, well, I know he started making music videos here, and then made Behind Enemy Lines, which is probably his best
that was
movie.
His big claim to fame.
The Bruce Willis movie, the Die Hard one, where his son, which I did see.
Was that Owen Wilson? Was it Owen Wilson in Behind Enemy Lines?
Yeah, Owen Wilson's first one. Owen Wilson and Gene Hackman. Yeah, when Gene Hackman is like. He apparently the stories, he's directing Gene Hackman. Gene, I think you should do it this way. And Gene Hackman's like, didn't we find you under a rock in Dublin somewhere? Like, you give me, tell me how to act. But it's a great movie. You did a great job.
But in Gene Hackman's defense, he was equally harsh to every director that he worked with, because he gave Wes Anderson an equally hard time the year beforehand. But yeah, his movies are Behind Enemy Lines, Flight of the Phoenix, The Omen, Max Payne, A Good Day to Die Hard, and IT was his last in 2016.
But yeah, I mean, the Omen's such a beloved film for me from my childhood, and I just love it so much. I don't really need to see a remake. It just wouldn't do it for me. But
yeah, just early 2000s Texas Chainsaw Massacre and fucking every great horror movie was being remade. Friday the 13th was being remade. Nightmare on Elm Street was being remade. It was just that horrible 10-year period where we got PG-13, defanged, declawed, just pussified, horrendous, awful, mainstream, family-friendly remakes of horror classics, and people are still fucking doing it. David Gordon Green just made the dumbest fucking horror movie in human history with The Exorcist Believer. It's like, write your own goddamn script. Like, take a page from the book of David Seltzer and write an original goddamn screenplay and blow our goddamn minds.
Yeah, because I mean, these are sort of they're classics for a reason, and. Yeah, I mean the whole you're wasting all your money buying this franchise, and you're gonna, you're never gonna probably recoup that money anyway. But
yeah, they spent $400 million getting the rights to The Exorcist from I think it was Morgan Creek, and I'm like, what if hypothetically you were to take that $400 million and you were to hire, I don't know, 1,000 screenwriters to spitball ideas and just basically create like a screenwriting factory. We want all y'all to to pitch and cook up brand new horror franchises. Of those thousands of screenplays they would have conceivably written, a couple of them would have been good. Just like just statistically, even if it was by accident, one of those writers might have accidentally invented the next great horror franchise. But nope, you got to spend $400 million to do a remake of The Exorcist, and it's just like it drives me fucking crazy. Which is why I loved When Evil Lurks so much. I saw this great Argentinian horror movie which came in the theater a couple days ago. It takes religion very seriously, takes the end of the world very seriously. It does it in a completely unique way unto itself, where I almost felt like it was like reinventing supernatural religious horror like then and there. But I think something about that Argentinian culture, and imagine like what David Gordon Green got wrong with The Exorcist is that he tried to take his foot off the gas when it came to religion, and you had basically like 4 or 5 different religious authorities, but there's no real commitment to the religious side. And I feel like what makes The Omen so strong is that they're completely invested in the religious side, and they're with total sincerity. And I feel like you got to take at least one religion very seriously if a religious horror film is going to have like, kind of going to hit you hard.
Yeah, it's like when you're saying the power of Christ compels you. You can't do it half-heartedly.
You got to believe.
Like fucking just, getting that holy water and the Exorcist, and with this, the iconography of the Catholic Church when they go to the monastery in the middle of nowhere and they get down, the guy's got his face all burnt, the whole side of it, and he's like scratching with his his limp hand and all
Gregory
that.
Peck's
and,
like, answer! Yeah. So good.
But there is nothing there. Tell me, and they go. And what's weird about that sequence as well, this is maybe my knock on the film, is because I was watching it again, and it is quite jarring. They go to the cemetery, and it's a set. And it's like, why did you film this on a fucking set? It's a soundstage. Like, and every single, Gregory
it feels
Peck
like a Hammer horror film set suddenly. Like, this doesn't look nearly as convincing.
Yeah, like it's good set, but it's a set, and it's so obviously a set. Like, and all these years later, it's so obviously a set. And like when the priest goes to when the priest goes to the American embassy in London, that's the American embassy in London that you're shooting in. And when they're doing the commentary, Richard Donner was like, "Oh yeah, that was the American ambassador's office that we shot in." Everything is so, verisimilitude, like it's so real. And even the bits they shoot in Shepperton and the estate, and then there's just this one sequence in the middle of it, which is one of the scariest sequences in the film with the dogs, and it's on a soundstage, and the background, the sky is painted. But you immediately, it's like they drive into another movie, and when they walk past the trees shake in a way that only fake trees shake, and that it's kind of strange. I mean, because I've seen the film a good few times, I was thinking, is this because now it's really going off into another world, like they're almost entering another dimension. It's the last bit of the film. It's getting really weird now. It's not sort of as grounded in reality because it's on a soundstage,
I imagine it just came down to how can we have control over this situation when we've got all these dogs running amok? How can we control the lighting? And it probably was just a creative compromise. But goddamn, if they just found some miserable old graveyard in Italy somewhere that looks like it's been there for 1,000 years, it would have been much more atmospheric.
100%. And I think looking back, that would have made the film better. That's the one knock on it. But as Richard Donner mentioned, it was 2.25 million. But they filmed in London, they filmed in Jerusalem, they filmed in Italy. They're all over in Italy, and he was describing the sequence where they do go to that monastery. They shot it in a day. Arriving in the car, the sheep, going down to the monastery, walking through it. Then the scenes with the monk are done back in a studio in London. And the church that they walk through is actually a church in London. But all these exteriors, it's a day's shoot for that. And it's fucking 2 hours driving from Rome. They get out, they shoot it, they pack up, they go back. It was like bang, bang, bang. No hanging around. 2 takes. It's like he describes.
That's what you get when you've been working in the world of TV for 10, 15 years, where you're like, as the expression they use, you got to make your day, where it's like there's no vanity project where you're allowed to go over schedule, over budget. You will be replaced and you will be fired. And so, you got to make your day. You either got to come in right on budget or under. There is no going over, or you're fucking out of there. And so, Richard Donner had been trained well with that discipline. Yeah,
and the same. There's a scene when Lee Remick dies, and Gregory Peck gets the news on the phone, and he's lying in the bed, and David what's his Hemmings, the photographer, I can't remember, comes in and he's telling him that he's found out about the town that's named after the apocalypse, and Gregory Peck then goes, he gives it the whole "when the Jews return to Zion and the comet rips the sky," and gives it that speech. The whole scene is one shot, and they were doing it, and he's like, "Yeah, I'm just going to do it one shot. It's going to play on Greg's face," and there's a really subtle track into him, and they're like, no, you need loads of he's like, no, don't need loads of different angles. Got a great actor here, Gregory Peck, and it just works. Like, it just completely sells it. And that's when he's like, if only you could remember the name. And he goes, the name is Bugenhagen. And then bang, they're in Jerusalem, and got Leo McKern there, and with the daggers, which is kind of, I just thought, again, it's a certain, like all horror movies, certainly unintentional funny bits, like, because he's flying back on a private jet and he's sitting on the plane, and on his lap are the 7 daggers. You just imagine the check. Any hand luggage to bring out? Yeah, just these.
Yeah, just these daggers that are designed to kill the Antichrist. Yeah,
just these. I was thinking I might bring them home and kill my only child with them. Oh, very good. So yeah, it's obviously funny that it's or handy that it's a private jet, that it's not like a Ryanair flight with his baggage allowance for his.
I love the way
daggers.
Gregory Peck says those lines, like, "These are knives. He wants me to stab him. He wants me to murder a child." It's one of like the last gasps of that classic old school golden age of Hollywood professionalism, because he was trained back in the 1940s, and obviously by the 70s, the directors and the stars from the golden age of Hollywood were dying out. But Peck, he was on the younger side, a much younger side, for the golden age of Hollywood. It wasn't one of those guys like Gary Cooper who started doing things in the late 20s or anything like that. And so I just like how you got that old school acting style mixing in with a very 70s era horror movie, and but it creates a perfect harmony.
Yeah, I mean, like, now we have Gregory Peck basically dragging Scout into a church and stabbing her to death. You know, like all these years later.
That would have made To Kill a Mockingbird even better.
Exactly, it's kind of subversive, but it's like, I know that he was sort of, Richard Donner had to convince him to do this, and he's like, how am I going to do it? It's like, you're insane. You've been driven insane by the voices in your head, and he was able to convince Gregory Peck that that's what it was. It sort of drove him over the edge, because I know there were loads of people considered for this part. Charlton Heston, Charles Bronson at one stage, because he worked with him in TV. Yeah,
I don't know, like someone like with like James Mason's gravitas, but I don't know if James Mason ever did an American accent, but yeah, you need somebody who, also because Gregory Peck has a very specific way of expressing himself, you believe the idea that he's an American who's spending time in the UK, because a lot of Americans, when they spend time in the UK for a long time, they'll pick up little affectations or little bits of pronunciation, and because Gregory Peck has that very theatrical, very formal, very like grammatically perfect way of expressing himself, it's all the more convincing that he's an American spending time in the UK. So yeah, I think it was pitch perfect casting. You cannot do better.
No, absolutely. Another one was William Holden was also considered, and he's like, horror, hokey. And then, of course, he saw how much money it made. And he's like, yep, Omen 2, sign me up.
Well, it's the biggest payday of Gregory Peck's career. Yeah, I mean, it's like if you can get some back-end participation on a hit movie, whether that's like Jack Nicholson on the fucking Batman or whatever the case may be, but that's where you make the serious money, where you take a chance, or like Arnold Schwarzenegger with Twins. Nobody really talks about Twins anymore, but because Arnold basically got paid almost nothing up front, but all on the back end, he and Danny DeVito made vast sums of money on Twins. Yeah,
and Gregory Peck got those back end points, and Richard Donner was supposed to as well, but he never did, apparently.
Studio accounting. And Marlon Brando got very well paid for Superman the movie and that sort of thing. But is there anything left that we have not gotten to? Like, I always try to make sure that when I'm singing the praises of a movie, to try to have some discipline of not talking about it longer than the actual running time of the film.
Well, that's true. That's true. But the one thing we could briefly discuss is the curse of the Omen, which
gotcha.
Maybe
the music was composed too well. Like the Latin chants in the music, it's all lines like "I hear voices," "We drink the blood," "Hail Satan," blah blah. Who knows? Maybe Jerry Goldsmith accidentally cursed the movie, because The Exorcist apparently was cursed as well. All these classic horror movies end up having like a curse kind of hovering over the proceedings.
Yeah, well, there's a few. I mean, Donner talking about it said, "Look, if we were making a romantic movie, we'd be talking about all the people who fell in love in the movie and
all
went
the
off
people who
together.
got laid while
And if we were
making
making
it,
a comedy, we'd say, oh, the hilarious thing happened. But we're making a horror movie. But two of the things that happened that really struck it, because I was reading a few of these articles. There's always like the curse of the movie. So that scene we just talked about, where he flies back from Jerusalem on the private jet, they had arranged to film it in that jet, and they got a call from the people saying, "Listen, we've just had this jet chartered. It's full, so we're going to get paid. So I know it's inconveniencing you, but do you mind coming back tomorrow to film that scene? And we'll let you have." You can lease the jet for a quarter of what you were going to pay for it. And of course, because it's a cheap movie, relatively, they're like, okay, fine, we'll move a few things around, we'll do another scene. And the plane took off, crashed, like got basically like 50 feet up in the sky, crashed, hit the fucking motorway, killed everyone on board, and killed and hit a car that was driving from the airport. In the car was the wife and children of the pilot of the plane, who
What
were
the
also
fuck?
killed. Yeah,
That does feel supernatural.
Yeah. So, and the that was the plane that they were supposed to be flying, but they postponed it by a day. It was in all the newspapers. And then the other story was both the producer and I think Richard Donner's planes from America were both hit by lightning on their way to London. As I say, lightning never strikes twice in the same place. It wasn't the same place, but it was the same production. And the other freakish thing was the during the baboon sequence in the zoo,
which is brilliant, and I can't believe we haven't even mentioned it yet. But that's one of the most awe-inspiring sequences of the whole fucking movie.
It's absolutely fantastic, and I remember going to those things in the kind of 80s, like Chessington and things like that. And people walking around dressed like they were just so, I don't know, so cheap, and the fact that you could just drive through these animals and
we had Lion Country Safari down in Florida, which I went to, and I remember an ostrich attacked the car at one point and just kept smashing its face against the car window, and we were laughing, but it could have been terrifying if it was like a baboon with like 4-inch fucking fangs.
Yeah, and as he describes another thing that was interesting, I heard Richard Donner say, so there's Gil Taylor shot it, incredible lighting cameraman, because it looks so fucking atmospheric, and he's worked on, I mean, he did Star Wars after this, and did a load of incredible movies. But he was kind of Richard Donner. I think he had some issue with the camera operator, because this was the classic crew where some DPs will operate and some will have a camera operator, and the camera operator on the Omen, he was a camera operator for his entire career, never really went on to light movies. Some people just like operating, but so when you have a Gil Taylor, he is controlling the light, how it looks, and then the operator, of course, is the framing. And Donner, being quite savvy, knowing how to use a camera, he would a lot of the time shoot it himself. And he described the scene in the back of with the baboons, he's shooting that, and he shot quite a few of the things, and that probably pissed off the camera operator or whatever. But they bought the Alpha. First they put bananas on the thing to try, and all the monkeys ran over and started eating the bananas. Not very scary. And then they said, right,
and then they tried putting like a baby in there, and the baboons were like, yeah, fucking take it, we don't
whatever.
care.
and then they said, but one of the males had been in a fight, a few of the alphas had been fighting, and one of the alphas was scarred up, and he said, look, I've got to bring him back to the hospital, the veterinary, to take the stitches out. So if you put him in the car, if you use the car to take him away, they're going to go crazy. So they put the alpha baboon in the back of the car with fucking Richard Donner, who's there with the fucking Arri camera, 35mm shooting handheld, and they drive through, and they went fucking crazy. They're they nearly smashed into the glass, and then
Lee Remick, the fear on Lee Remick's face is so genuine.
It's genuine, because he was saying that she's screaming her head off, and he's like, no, not yet. I'm not ready. No, and she's just, and he looks down. He realizes that the baboon, the alpha baboon, is starting to come out of his tranquilizer, and he's grabbed in
Her
the
hair.
car. Not
Yeah.
he's yanking on her hair, and
Yeah.
the whole fucking thing is going crazy. Like, and you just get that atmosphere from it. But the next day, after they were filming shooting there, after they finished shooting, a guy went into the tiger sanctuary and obviously forgot to lock the door, and he was mauled to death and killed by the tigers.
Damien
Once again,
has that
the
effect on
curse
animals,
of
yeah.
the-
And I think that's one of the coolest things about it. Like, you don't need to show him blasting lightning bolts out of his fingertips or breathing fire or any stupid shit like that. Just showing how animals lose their goddamn minds in his presence. It's like, yeah, there's something different about Damien, and I think he makes the natural world unnatural, and it's so subtle and so cool and so effective, and so horror filmmakers should take notes when watching The Omen, because so many get it wrong.
Yeah, I mean, that's why I love the sequence with the giraffes. It's so simple, like, but just because they're such odd-looking creatures, and
Yeah.
you know, the whole, obviously putting the camera on the ground, the height disparity between a 5-year-old boy and a giraffe, and the fact that they're such kind of gentle-looking creatures, and they're like, nah, this guy is sketchy, and they run for it. But I forgot, yeah, the other thing that happened was because I read all about the special effects guy was John Richardson, and he went on to work, as did the editor, with Stuart Baird, with Donner again on Superman and all this sort of stuff, like You Believe a Man Can Fly. But the film he did after The Omen was A Bridge Too Far, and he was on location in Holland, and he was in a car crash in his BMW, and his girlfriend, Liz Moore, was killed. Not only was she killed, she was decapitated by a sheet of glass. Yeah, which is...
So I guess the question is it worth it to make a brilliant horror movie if you know you might unintentionally cast a curse upon your cast and crew, causing all sorts of mayhem for years to come?
Yeah, when I was like, I know that actually happened, because I read up, obviously, and but the producer was saying, and when he got out of the car, he saw he was in a place called Omen, or no, he saw there's a town in Holland, because they were shooting The Bridge Too Far and all. It's called Omen, Ommen, and he said, yeah, and the sign said it's 66.6 kilometers that way. And I was like, okay, calling bullshit on that. No road sign says 0.6.
Yeah.
If you just said 66, I'd believe it.
Exactly.
But yeah, so some fucking freaky things did happen that sort of mirrored, you know, maybe it's coincidence and whatever, but there's certainly... There are some films they say are cursed, and you're going, oh, that's a bit of a stretch. But yeah, The Omen, some messed up things happen. It's like, yeah, the what is it they say, that the greatest trick the devil ever pulled was by convincing the world that he didn't exist. And the devil won't want you to make this film because he doesn't want you to publicize the fact that, as Father Donovan said, he does exist. And he's out there, all you terrified kids. So, yeah.
So what do you think is the future for the horror genre? Like, do you think it's possible for a movie with like real religious conviction to still play well and be like a blockbuster? Because like that Argentinian movie I mentioned, When Evil Lurks, it's a small movie and it's going to get a small release and it'll probably have a small impact. But do you think it's possible in these cynical kind of days of social media and the internet to make like a full-blown like Christian-themed horror movie and have it still play to big numbers?
I think it is, but it would probably come from the point of view of like the victims or whatever, the people in it going, oh my God, this is actually real. As in, you know, you don't come from a place where people accept certain things. You come from a place of cynicism, and maybe that could be made to...
Which is part of The Exorcist. Chris McNeil is an atheist. Yeah. She's a skeptic. Yeah. And over the course of the movie, she's like, I've exhausted every other alternative, talked to every single doctor, every psychiatrist, and then finally she has to go to The Exorcist.
Yeah, and I mean, I think maybe there'll be a film, like, there's something that's undiscovered that will happen in the horror genre. Like, we were talking earlier, you were mentioning, like, why was this film so successful? But part of it was, like, when it came out. It came out in 1976. Now, obviously in America, you just had Watergate, and I'm not as au fait with what was going on. But in England, there was a strike, there was a 3-day week, there was garbage piling up in the street. 1976 was when punk happened. It was when the Sex Pistols were number one with Anarchy in the UK. And, you know, it felt like, oh my God, end of times, things are changing. But the whole punkishness. Like it's a kind of punky movie. It's kind of like, you know, I mean, obviously it's a big budget studio Hollywood movie, but it was like, you know, $25,000 for the special effects budget, which would be like, you know, a lunch tab today. Like it was really kind of made on the fly. Like when they were doing these things in Italy and in Rome, running around in taxis, like everything was done on the hoof with the director shooting it out the window on his shoulder.
And
so
like
it had
very
that energy.
rarely do we get a big budget horror movie like Rosemary's Baby and The Exorcist feel like prestigious productions, but in general, the great horror classics are done on the fly.
Yeah, so there'll be some great idea that comes from a place of cynicism and that modern, disbelief of religion that maybe will make it even more shocking when people realize, oh my God, this is actually happening or whatever. So maybe it will, I don't know, but who knows? Who knows? They've got a lot to live up to.
Yeah, absolutely. We all like anybody writing or directing horror movies. They are living in the shadow of giants, and it's funny. I never think of Richard Donner as being like having like this great aptitude for scaring the hell out of people because I grew up on all these very different movies. I mean, Lethal Weapon is just I saw the movie 1,000 times when it came on HBO, and I just absolutely love it to pieces. But nothing about it feels like The Omen. I just love seeing. I like the directors who are genre hoppers, where it's like. On one hand, it's cool when you see someone like Mike Flanagan devoting their entire career to the horror genre, but also like how you see Richard Donner's like, I'll make comedies, I'll make action movies, I'll make horror movies, I'll make superhero movies. You know, give me a chance to direct, and he can do just about anything.
Yeah, I mean, he is a bit like a Howard Hawks or something. Like he did kind of, bounce around kind of comedy and whatever. But like, I think from watching the documentary, man's John Richardson, the special effects guy said, because of his kind of way he direct, he's definitely my favorite director I've ever worked with. Who's just he would.
He just also seems like a really good guy. He's an incredibly likable person, and you're like, God damn, like he's sharp, he's ambitious, he's aggressive, but he's nice, and it just seems like he would just be so much fun to have worked for.
Yeah, and he says like, I mean, if it wasn't happening, I'd be on the beach in Maui with a cocktail in my hand. Like I just like to have fun. He does I mean, in the commentary, when Patrick Troughton's running through the beside the river in Fulham, and you've got the wind machine and everything, and Richard Donner said, "Oh, I was lucky that tree got hit by lightning that day. We happened to be shooting there." He's kind of he's very laid back about the achievement of the film, and seems to have been a bit of gas, which you'd imagine you would have to have on a film like this, a bit of gallows humor to keep everyone from going stark staring mad.
Excellent. Well, Simon, thank you for making the deep tease pitch all those many months or a year and a half ago, whenever it was when you first said you wanted to kind of attach your name to Wrong Reel 666 if and when it ever happened. And so who knows, maybe indirectly you even kept the audio version of the podcast going for as long as it's been going 9 years now, and I've averaged about 70 episodes a year over the course of that 9-year period. And I feel like I didn't want to like make like a big deal out of like when the audio part of the history of the podcast will come to an end, but I feel like this is as good a topic with which to end this chapter before we start the next chapter moving forward. So yeah, I have no idea what Wrong Reel 667 is going to be, but I'm going to let Wrong Reel 666 live in infamy for a good long while, and then we shall resume. And hopefully I can get you back. I know some people are not down with doing video interviews, but hopefully I can coax you into coming on to do a video podcast at some point in the not-so-distant future. Maybe it'll be you and Mr. O'Mara talking about Postman Always Rings Twice. I know that's an episode y'all are both keen on doing.
Yeah, that's it. It could be Wrong Reel 777. We've got to bring the Lord back into your
Absolutely.
life.
Yeah, sorry. So what's the flip side to The Omen? What is the movie that will save the world and make people believers and make people feel good?
God, I have no idea. I have to think about that. Heaven Knows Mr. Allison or something like that.
Because there are some cheesy ones out there that are unwatchable, but every once in a while you'll see something like, I feel like It's a Wonderful Life, because it's got a fucking angel. People always forget like one of the main characters of the movie is an angel. Like it's a religiously themed movie, even if it feels very, very grounded. But I'll have to think long and hard. What is the counterpoint to The Omen?
Yeah, I mean, the one that comes to mind, like the one that kind of really I find really uplifting and great, is that Lucas Moodysson film Together, or Tillsammans in Swedish, which is like just a lovely sort of has a nice vibe to the end of it. It's very it's not twee or anything, but
I think
but
the
it's
only
kind of,
Lucas Moodysson
fun.
film I've seen is Show Me Love, which I loved, but I need to see more of his stuff.
Yeah. Oh, he's great. But yeah, that film together is really worth. I've got it here somewhere. It's really worth tracking down.
Well, very cool. Well,
It's
just as a
a feel-good
reminder, in
movie.
case they were skipping through at the beginning, where can people find your films? Where can people find your work? Where can people find you online? Now is the time to plug and promote the oeuvre of Simon O'Neill.
Oh God. Well, SimonO'Neill.net. If anyone wants to watch, there's kind of some stuff there. And I'm SIM_O'Neill on Twitter. Not really that active on it, but I'm there. And if you're listening to this before the 30th of October and you live in Ireland, or you've got a VPN and you know how to use those things, you can watch my short on Monday night on RTE2 or on the RTE player after that for the next year. It'll be up there, so you can watch it. And happy Halloween, everyone.
Happy Halloween. Hell yeah. It's my favorite night of the year. I don't know why. I fucking hate Christmas. I hate Thanksgiving. I hate Valentine's Day. I hate Easter. I hate all these fucking holidays. But Halloween, sweet baby Jesus, I love everything about it. It's the only holiday where for like a month leading up to it, I'm like, oh, I need to start reading more horror fiction, watch more horror. Just thinking about horror. I need to get my brain in the proper frame of mind. And I'm trying to think like what I should do this year. I'm thinking what I might do. If I can find a way to get around like the copyright issues, I might try to do like a live stream where I just like share some of my favorite horror trailers. But I need to make sure I won't get like flagged in the middle of the live stream. But I feel like that might be a fun way to mark the occasion. But I'm still brainstorming on that front. But yeah, happy Halloween to all the Wrong Reel listeners. And we hope you all have enjoyed this episode. Please remember to leave a rating and review. And I look forward to sharing future episodes in a video format in the not so distant future. But thanks again for listening. Definitely revisit the movie, but more importantly, as always, onwards and upwards.
Ain't like it used to be, but it'll do.
You know how to whistle, don't you, Steve? You just put your lips together and blow.